Hey guys, tonight we slip down to the edge of a Miocene lake, about 8.7 million years in the past, where dusk folds like silk over bronze water, and the reeds breathe in time with you. You stand on damp sand that puckers under your toes, listening to insects wind up the night, like a tiny orchestra, trying to decide whether thirst or caution wins. The horizon smoulders violet, the shallows mutter. Something large has already drawn a smooth slide mark into the water. It's gorgeous, and to be honest, you probably won't survive this if you treat it like a postcard. Here, beauty writes checks that danger loves to cash. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and your local time in the comments. I love seeing this little campfire stretch across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move like someone carrying a quiet cup. The lake is hammered bronze under a purple sky, and the reed heads clack together in little wind chimes. You crouch low, far enough from the lip that anything with a fossil-sized mouth has to commit close enough to smell algae and warm shell. The sand is a ledger gazelle slots like quotation marks, stiltbird pins. And that gleaming slide mark, where something heavy entered earlier. It catches starlight and edits your plan. A mainstream truth hums beneath your ribs by the late Miocene. The East African rift is carving the land into a patchwork of lakes, rivers, and shrinking marshes. Ancient soils and the chemistry in grazers' teeth shout that C4 grasses are spreading, turning woodlands into mosaics and pushing creatures like you to the edges where grass meets water, safety meets risk, and dinner meets diner. You don't recite isotope ratios. You just feel openness at your back and dark water ahead. You test the shore with a stick. It sinks 6 inches into mud. A soft hand with opinions about ankles. You step back to firmer sand and let thirst practice patience. Left a nightjar coughs. Right a discreet plop punctures the cricket hum and is followed by the kind of silence that edits your next move. You freeze count to 30 and pretend you're a shrub who has made peace with life choices. You smell clay, algae, and the faint copper of evaporating water. Shell heaps above the tide line are white and old, a library of meals you can read by touch, spirals of snails, hinges of mussels, cracked carapace. Tomorrow a flat stone and a careful wrist could turn these into salt and protein. The shoreline is a grocery with a terrible security guard. Joke 1. The clerk never clocks out and is probably 8 feet long. You tip a gourd into a ripple shadow cast by a sunken branch. The branch bumps the gourd. Your pulse bumps your throat. You set the gourd down and wait. You listen the way prey listens for bubbles exhaled by something that thinks in ambush angles, for the hollow gulp of a fish at the surface, for the dry rattle in reeds that could be a crab, or could be something that owns more teeth than you own plans. Humor sneaks in to keep your hands steady. If the water grows eyes, you're done. A fringe tidbit drifts in because brains collect trivia. Like burrs much later along another river, people will smear crocodile dung on skin and call it medicine or protection. You blessedly stick to mud. It's deodorant, insect screen, and couture. Joke 2 tonight's look is swamp core, breathable, seasonless, and daringly matte. Bats tack low over the reed tops, stitching dusk with invisible thread. On the far bank, thunder whispers, distant but opinionated. You tilt your head and taste the pressure change on your tongue, metallic as a coin. Floods belong to another hour, but the breath of rain rearranges tonight's map. You mark a hummock as fallback, a snag as blind a sand tongue, as a place to step without sinking. You keep your profile below the line of starlight. You set a rhythm, 1 breath per step along the shore, parallel to the water, never straight in. Each breath is a chance to notice tiny frogs hop like misplaced punctuation. A heron stands on one leg like a sentence refusing to end. Midges blur into a pale cloud over a quiet inlet. Fish beneath, maybe. You consider wading for clams, then remember the slide mark, and decide your curiosity can wear a lab coat and still be fear. That's wisdom in work boots. You angle toward a patch where breeze cancels mosquito songs. Joke 3 gentle and true, the mosquitoes here are unionized and require you to file a flight plan before they land. You smear another ribbon of mud on your forearm anyway and feel the day's heat release from the ground into the night, like stepping onto a sleeping animal, warm, steady, indifferent. Inventory, minimal movement. Constellations low over the lake fix east and the slow march of hours. A ribbon of midges points to a backwater with less current. A soft ticking in the reeds outlines a small hunter you'd rather not meet. You add one harmless hack to your pocket of odd tricks. A fish scale angled just right makes a tiny mirror good for teasing out eye shine or for noticing you've painted a clownish smear of clay on your nose. Comedy is camouflage. You think about sleep and vote for barely. The elder's spot upslope by a fig tree waits its roots curtaining a shallow overhang where dropped fruit thump like muffled drums. You picture the root zig ravine dead trunk that looks like a crocodile from one angle and a bridge from another. Historians still argue whether occasional wading and water-edge life nudged your lineage toward upright posture. You don't write a paper, you just straighten as you test depth with your stick, because standing tall keeps your chest out of the water and your heart in the rhythm you can manage. The lake exhales. Fireflies practice minimalist Morse. Far off a hyrax complains with operatic sincerity proof that even small mammals have opinions on bedtime. You let your shoulders sink by a thumb's width. Sleep comes here, but sleep is written in pencil. You'll doze with your ear toward the water and your back to the open ground the way all edge-dwellers do. In the morning, there will be prints to read, riddles in mud and shells to open. For now, the contract with the waterline is simple. Don't surprise it. Don't let it surprise you. And remember that the prettiest places have the sharpest teeth. You learn quickly that water writes the schedule, and you just annotate in the margins. Dawn lifts like pale smoke over the rift. And every decision where you step, where you nap, where you dare to chew unfolds from the river's curves, the oxbows hush, and the stubborn glitter of shrinking pools. Water is the boss. You're the unpaid intern who shows up early, keeps quiet and hopes not to be noticed. Roots come first. You thread the day near the edge, but never on it, as if walking beside a gif of invisible teeth. You hug the backs of termite mounds and eroded gullies, so your outline breaks into brush, not brunch. A bend that yesterday offered a shortcut turns trap when a fresh hippo path crumbles the bank. You add 10 patient minutes for the long arc and pretend you meant to do that all along. Water changes its mind hourly, so you answer with quiet edits, a sidestep here, a wait there, a palm on a tree to feel the faint ground tremors your ears might miss. Sleep sites are water's decision too. On breezy nights you settle upslope close enough to hear ripples far enough that surprise would have to run uphill to find you. On still nights you climb a root-tangled shelf where figs drop like soft clocks, thumping the dirt with a sleepy metronome. The sentinel sleeps least and faces the dark gleam because danger often arrives as reflection before it arrives as sound. The elder's rule holds like scripture, never sleep in a dry channel. A wandering cloud upstream can turn harmless sand into a brown wall while you dream. Food obeys the shoreline. By mid-morning, you nose into a backwater where dragonflies patrol like tiny helicopters. You lever starchy tubers from silty banks, nutty wet and grounding, and turn stones to tease out crabs with careful fingers. Your flat rock becomes a table, your gourd a bowl. The waterline is a buffet with a strict dress code. Quiet feet steady, Hands 0 splashing. You keep the code because you remember last night's slide mark shining like a neon do not. And because beauty here tends to smile with too many teeth. A mainstream truth hums beneath these rituals. In the late Miocene, the East African rift is tearing basins that fill and empty like lungs. Lakes rise and shrink, rivers meander, hard oxbows blink on and off, and the mud lays down pages of diatomite and clay where future scientists will read fish bones, hippo teeth, and pollen from C4 grasses stretching across ground that once lived mostly in shade. You don't quote the layers, you read them with your toenails and your thirst. You carry small tricks for reading water, as if it wrote in cursive. Toss a tuft of dry grass, and watch the drift east movement hints at hidden current. Stillness says maybe. Tap the surface with a stick and feel whether a gentle pull tugs back. Smell first sweet mud with tannin notes means a sandy seep worth a careful sip. Sulphury funk means leave it to the snails. You even listen to the frog choir. When the pitch tightens into frantic, the pool is shrinking, and shrinking pools pull in desperate bodies, the kind you do not want to meet up close. A fringe tidbit rides along because your brain hoards oddities like "Burrs some monkeys today." Crush pungent millipedes and rub the foam into their fur as insect repellent. You copy the spirit, not the recipe. Working aromatic leaves into your mud, call it clay number 5, and remembering that crocodile dung sunscreen is a trend you'll let pass. The mosquitoes file their grievances anyway, but at least they respect the effort. Light joke 1, if the insects had a customer service line, you'd still be on hold from last season. Water dictates time as much as space. Midday heat thickens and asks you to nap in high shade, where breeze can find your skin. Evening brings the big gamble drink or don't. You choose the seep over the open lip because seep water burbles from sand like a quiet apology and carries fewer surprises. You scoop, let silt settle, and sip while keeping your face angled so your eyes never leave the surface. Even thirst negotiates. Group choreography grows from shorelines. The smallest walk between shoulders, the bold scout ahead. The oldest carry the map. Roots stored not on parchment, but in stories. The fork where a gomphother once bogged down the fig with roots like ladders. The sand tongue with a treacherous false bottom. You hum those paths like lullabies. Historians still argue whether this water-bound navigation, rehearsed day after day, sharpened the memory palaces that later supported complex language. You don't solve the debate. You just recite tomorrow's route under your breath until the shape of it smooths your pulse. Even your sounds obey water rules. Near open shallows, you talk in throat-click whispers and hand signs, 2 fingers for reed path, a rocking palm for mud, a pinch for crab. Farther upslope, you allow ordinary breath and even a stray laugh, because humor keeps vigilance from curdling into panic. Light joke 2, if vigilance were a job, the benefits package would include exactly 1 sunset and unlimited mud masks. Season after season, water edits your body language. You step with broad feet. Toes splayed reading firmness the way fingertips read braille. Arms float a little from your sides over damp ground ready to windmill into balance. Sometimes you rise on your hind legs for a few careful strides to see over sedge and judge the silver flash of open water. You like the taller view and the way it keeps chest and face out of the brush, even if it makes your shadow look like someone you don't know yet. The river is also a rumor mill, and you learn to read gossip without words. Bird flight lines tell you who drank and where. A ribbon of dust over a downstream bend means hooves, which means churned banks and churned nerves. Float scum. The pale fringe on a downwind shore announces a small fish die-off. Grim for fish, generous for easy protein if you can tolerate the bouquet. You watch snails climb reeds all at once and file it as a memo from the chemistry department. Something in the water just changed. Flood memory lives in your calves. Debris lines sit like necklaces on tree trunks marking where the brown wall once reached. You keep sleep sights above that mark always. A sudden mutter of thunder upstream rewrites the afternoon in a single sentence. No foraging in low loops, no shortcuts across the channel, no daydreaming on sandbars, while the sky decides what to do with you. The long way is the safe way, and the safe way is a long breathing exhale. Even play bows to water's verdict. You teach the young to toss pebbles into margins and wait. If the wrong kind of ripple answers you, retreat and turn it into a story later by fig drum. Another rule braided into memory: patience beats speed. You show them how to skirt an oxbow by reading low hummocks that mark firm ground, and how to stand where cross breeze drifts off the water so the mosquito union can't stage a sit-in on their ankles. They learn fast because here the curriculum grades pass/fail and the exam is nightly. When dark returns, you make camp where wind can carry reed rustles away, and the view frames both the shimmer and the escape. You mark 3 exits with tow lines in dust, set the sentinel's seat with a back to a scarred trunk, and let your shoulders drop. The lake still writes tomorrow. You'll pencil the margins again at dawn. Water sleeps without closing its eyes, and you sleep without fully closing yours, 2 wary neighbors maintaining a truce that renews, renegotiates, and miraculously holds. Light joke: 3 congratulations on another shift completed by your manager, hydrology. You meet the shoreline like a negotiator easing into a difficult room. The reeds on your right hiss secrets. The water on your left holds its breath. Ahead, the bank shows a polished groove where a heavy body slid down recently. Sand-combed smooth edges crisp and a faint tail scribble, punctuating the exit like punctuation. That's the corridor. You don't walk it. You read it the way you'd read a warning sign that someone thoughtfully carved with their belly. Ambush geometry becomes your bedtime math. Anything that waits under the lip owns the first move, and its first move is a spring delivered in near silence, a wedge of head, a V of eyes, and then the world flips. So you angle your approach never straight on and stop a body length back from the wet dark line, because a crocodile's lunge can cheat up onto shore farther than your optimism wants to believe. You choose a spot where the bank shelves gradually, so anything large must reveal some back before it gets leverage. The elders call it making them pay a toll in daylight. The Miocene lake keeps its regulars. Long-snouted fish specialists patrol the calmer margins. Think Euthycodon with its drawn-out pipette of a snout, while heavier-jawed bruisers' ancestors in the neighborhood of the modern Nile crocodile favor the channels and the rim of the deeper bowls. You don't say the names, you read the signatures. Narrow snout, lots of fine tooth dimples stamped in mud. That's a fish thief that still thinks your ankle is a sturgeon. Wide muzzle, fewer but broader dents, and a drag groove that looks like a lazy plow. That one files you under anything that moves. You practice the slide mark litany. Smooth ramp, crisp sides, alternating belly sides where scales shaved the sand tail drag in the center. Claw ticks where the forefeet grabbed to launch. If the ramp glitters damp at dawn, you change your plans. If dung beads pepper the upper bank beside a low dome of heaped grass and mud, you back away twice as far. Nest mound and mother is a temperament you don't interview. The wind carries a sweet, foul blend of rot and algae from such places. It's the perfume of not today. A mainstream fact anchors your caution. Crocodilians can remain submerged for many minutes, slinking with almost no surface disturbance, and their pressure-sensing skin detects tiny ripples the way your toe tremor your gourd dip. Even your breath falling on water might ring bells in a jaw that has not forgotten the Triassic. They do not need to see you clearly to know you exist. You answer with choreography, feet on dry grit, one test tap with a stick, a pause for bubbles, and then a sideways lean to put your core weight out of any sudden grabs line. You borrow other creatures' eyes. Wading birds bloom into panic when the corridor wakes. Terrapins lift their heads in slow periscope. You watch a jacana's long toes flutter across lily pads like someone walking on misplaced paper fans. When it halts and stares into nothing, you treat the nothing as very real. Dragonflies draw flight lines that curve around invisible presences just under the surface. You learned last season that when insects refuse to fly straight across a particular strip of shallows, the water is not empty. You also select your drinking places the way a shy person selects a seat back to something solid, face to the room. A fallen log that juts into the lake offers a narrow bar where you can stand above the thin meniscus of danger. A shallow seep, burbling through sand, turns the surface into a tremble that complicates any clean strike. You kneel with one knee planted, not both, so you can pivot and lurch backward if the water coughs wrong. Light joke 1. You treat hydration like it's a team sport, and the opposing team is sponsored by Teeth Unlimited. Fringe tidbit time, because your brain hoards weird facts like shiny shells, big crocodiles, sometimes balance twigs on their snouts during bird nesting season, stick baiting, letting inattentive builders make the fatal reach. Whether your basin's bruisers have discovered this trick or not, you keep your hands away from any floating lumber that looks too helpful. Also, late-season males may bellow so deep the surface shivers into a water dance. Pretty impressive, and an excellent reason to do your admiring from the far bank. You think through escape routes with almost ceremonial care. Straight back is a tripping hazard. Sideways buys you time. The two-step retreat becomes muscle memory. One wide step diagonally. Plant second step upslope. Then a pause to listen before the third. You practice it dry like a fire drill you hope never to use. Joke 2, congratulations. You now know the Miocene's only dance craze, the slide mark shuffle. The corridor reaches inland too in the form of portages, damp channels cut by hippos, and rains where a crocodile might drag between pools. You don't nap in those. When you cross them, you cross with a line of eyes, one looking down for prints. Fresh belly drags gloss the mud. One scanning side. Reads for the subtle quilt pattern of armored flanks, and one imagining where you'll throw your body if the world erupts. Your stick becomes a metronome against your thigh tap. Look, breathe tap, look, breathe. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen someone will say later by fig drum, and you'll groan amicably. You smear mud instead, and you keep it pale on the wrists, so a quick glance shows whether the water has painted it darker with a creeping rim. It's low-tech motion detection for skin. If the rim thickens and climbs with no breeze to blame, you don't argue with chemistry. You move. Historians still argue whether the strict water taboos preserved in much later stories, no bathing after dusk, no drinking alone, no fishing without a watcher, were born from practical Miocene memories like yours, or whether they arose independently in many places. You nod at the idea as you watch your own rules harden into sayings. Drink where the wind has a job. Never sit at a slide. Make the water pay daylight. These are footnotes in mud, and they teach better than speeches. You scout for safer crossings, because the world east of the channel sometimes holds figs you want or shade you crave. The best passage isn't the narrowest. It's the loudest, shallowest, most annoying. Gravel tongues that grind underfoot, riffles that tattle, and sunstruck inches where a back must show. To pass you risk those. You send the bold with long sticks, first stepping like you're testing drums, light, light, lift. When a fish flicks near their ankles, both sentinels watch the waterline instead of the splash. You've all learned that distraction is an ally of the corridor. Bodies change to match the habit. Your toes spread in wet sand to find purchase. Heels stay light for quick pivots. Sometimes you rise onto your hind legs for 2 or 3 careful steps to see over reeds and count floating logs that might not be logs. That brief bipedal burst keeps lungs higher, eyes wider, and dignity negotiable. Joke 3, if anyone asks, you're not walking, you're doing enhanced periscope mode. Toward evening you encounter a bank where slide marks overlap like braid. The air is sweet with fish oil and old algae. You trace one groove with your stick and feel fresh moisture cool your knuckles. You choose a U-turn without shame. Thirst can take the long way. Pride can take a nap. A heron croaks agreement long and prehistoric, as if the lake itself approves your decision to remain snack-free. As the sky pours copper into the bowl of water, you seal the corridor behind you with distance and a last backward glance. The ambush geometry never stops existing. You just step out of its proof. In the hush that follows, you catalogue what you've learned, read the ramps, trust the birds, love the shallow riffles, make the water pay daylight. The corridor will be there tomorrow, patient, polished, primed. And you'll meet it again with your mixture of superstition and science, your mud polka dots, and your careful feet, and that sideways stance that says you've survived another dusk on the teeth line. You hear them before you see them. The low pot-lid clunk of nostrils popping shut, the hollow bass of breath pushed through water, and then a necklace of bubbles that climbs the channel like a warning buoy. The corridor behind you belonged to crocodiles. This one belongs to temperaments on 4 splayed toes. The bank dips into a dark run where sedges bow outward, and the mud is stamped with wide, dew-clawless crescents, not hoof, not paw, something barrel-shaped that treats paths like property lines. You pause where the wind crosses your face, because scent tells truths faster than eyes. It smells like river weeds and iron, and something musky that says in a very formal way, occupied. You angle to a termite hummock and peek. There he sits, or rather he hovers with feet on the bottom, because these cousins don't truly swim a low-slung mass, with eyes and ears riding high like periscopes. He opens wide in a slow pink yawn, not for air, but for theatre. You count the seconds, because the longer the yawn, the closer you are to a reminder that the channel has a landlord. Beside him a smaller, younger tank rises and sinks, and what looks like a half-submerged boulder exhales with surprising sarcasm. You stay very still. Your shadow does not get a vote. This is the realm of Anthracothera's hippo ancestors, and near kin stalking the Miocene wetlands with long bodies and semi-aquatic habits. You don't name Mericopotamus or Libycosaurus. You read posture and patrols. They browse soft banks, shuffle between pools on hip-high causeways, and guard inlets like bouncers at a nightclub with no exit signs. The wide, tamped highways that cut straight through reeds are theirs. You don't nap across them unless you want to wake as a speed bump. You learned that once. It was educational and damp. A mainstream fact steadies your caution among modern megafauna hippos are notoriously dangerous to people more so than many carnivores because water is their office and they treat corridors like cubicles with tusks. Translate that back to 8.7 million years swap in their Miocene forebears. And your rulebook writes itself, never get between bulk and deep water. Never block a preferred exit. Never assume a yawn means sleepy when it actually means I see you. Light joke. One think of them as librarians who hate noise and shelve you under periodicals if you rustle. You study the bubble language. A slow string rising from one spot is a relaxed grazer. Scattered bursts in a fan shape mean someone pivoted and is scanning. Tight, furious pearl chains that boil near the bank are the preface to something fast and personal. You watch for tail sign, too, the brief helicopter flick that in their modern cousins spreads dung like confetti to underline territory. The water here carries floating blades of chewed sedge, clipped clean at a slant. It's a place to admire from a comfortable relationship status distant. The channel hums with rules you've added to memory. You choose your path not by shortest distance, but by fewest tantrums. Off to your right, a shallow riffle chuckles around a patch of gravel. No big bodies like to jostle stones. They prefer soft bottoms, where their feet can piston without stubbing toes. You put that on the map. Left a narrow throat widens into a bowl with one entrance and one temper the wrong geometry. You keep moving slow as dusk feet splayed for purchase, one knee ready to turn into the slide mark shuffle if the water translates bubbles into a charge. Your stick becomes an etiquette wand. You test bank firmness and listen through the wood for that particular hollow that means undercut one wrong step and you'll break the roof of someone's hallway. You tap the surface once, not to announce yourself bad idea, but to watch for wake. A big body leaves a slow, rolling V, even when it tries to be shy. Dragonflies rewrite their flight lines around invisible shoulders. Jacanas clatter to lilies farther out and start a fussy gossip circle. If birds hold a meeting, you assume you're the agenda item, and you excuse yourself. Fringe tidbit time. Modern hippos secrete a red-orange blood sweat, not blood and not sweat, but a pair of acids that work like sunscreen and antimicrobial lacquer. Whether your Miocene neighbors varnish themselves the same way is uncertain, but the idea folds nicely into your existing skincare routine. Mud first, always mud. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen. Still a no from you. Clay number 5 remains on brand with notes of mineral and a finish of, please don't notice me. The big male cough grunts. It's a hollow drumbeat you feel in your ribs, an infrasonic memo. He heaves forward and the channel's surface tilts, then smooths with an authority you respect the way you respect cliffs. You backstep 2 diagonals and let a screen of papyrus claim you. Your breath lengthens into the slow 4 count that turns panic into inventory exits marked. Wind-steady youngsters behind you, copying your posture, the practiced statue with options. Light joke too, you are not frozen with fear. You are curating stillness. While you wait, you read the bank like a field guide. Prints overlap where the herd climbs out to graze after dark, deep toe pits splayed like a 4-fingered hand. Slide marks polish the lip of a favorite entrance. A mud-plastered trunk nearby bears the high, greasy rub of massive flanks. You measure it with your eyes the way elders taught you up to your chest, plus an open hand again. The message is simple: you are small. Please be clever. Historians still argue whether hippos sprang directly from Anthracothera stock, or whether both groups share a deeper, messier branch with early whale kin, a family reunion held by water. You don't settle the tree tonight. You settle for the part that matters. Creatures shaped by lakes act like lakes, calm then sudden. Placid, then opinionated. Heavy, always heavy. You plan route and rhythm around their moods. Eventually the bubbles loosen, drifting like a sigh instead of a fuse. That's your cue to shift. You edge toward the riffle, scanning for crocodile slide marks out of habit, because one problem never excludes another. The gravel sings against your ankles, small, honest sound, and you love it for that honesty. Knees bent, torso leaned you cross in 3 slow pulses. The youngsters step where your prints darken, and the sentinel behind counts heads without counting. Across you keep moving for a dozen breaths before you let your shoulders sink. Distance is the best apology. On the far bank, the world widens into fig shade and a ribbon of soft herb. You kneel and pry a tuber from moist loam, slicing the skin with a shell and washing the bite in a cupped palm of water you draw from a seep. Not the open bowl. You chew slow. The channel slurps behind you, making the same satisfied sounds. You don't look back until you've swallowed, because courtesy and survival share a table here. Light joke 3. You and the big male have agreed to split the buffet. He gets the entire river, and you get this one perfectly average tuber. As twilight turns the water to beaten coin, you wrap the lesson into the evening's quiet reed bubbles as verbs, not decoration. Prefer gravel to velvet. Never shortcut across a sighing bowl. Never ever stand between a barrel and its doorway. The crocodile corridor taught ambush geometry. The Anthracothera channel teaches diplomacy with teeth, with tonnage, with patience. You walk on mud camouflaged and humble, following a path where sedges brush your legs like tired cats, thankful that the only thing chasing you now is the slow, forgiving dark. The channel narrows and grows quiet, tea-colored and sleepy, the kind of ankle-deep calm that whispers, "It's fine," right before it isn't. You pad the margin with your stick out front, feeling for firmness, listening past your own breath. Then whoomp, a hollow gulp blooms on the surface, a circle racing outward like a thrown bracelet. Your toes reconsider their career. This is the realm of broad heads and whiskered taste, where the mouths are bigger than the water seems to allow, and curiosity nips come with suction. Catfish own this strip the way thorn owns a path. You see it in the slow V-wakes that run without a back breaking the surface, and in the tickle of barbels nosing silt where your shadow falls. They taste with skin and whiskers. Your ankles are just two pale grubs wriggling at the buffet. You don't wade straight in. You choose gravel tongues that complain underfoot. Small stones make honest noise and avoid velvet silt that hides both spines and sudden mouths. Your stick taps ahead like a blind person reading a rude sentence. The first hazard is small but persuasive pectoral spines. Step wrong on a resting catfish, and those stiff fin bones remind you politely and painfully that the fish has policies. You learn to plant your heel lightly and let toes feel forward, never stomping down where softness pools. If you must lift a fish from under a flat stone, you cradle from the belly palms, away from the locking spines, and you do it where the water is shallow enough that a thrash won't drown your balance. Light joke 1, your ankles have filed a formal complaint with HR. Unfortunately, HR is also fish. Bigger hazards breathe air. A pale oval flashes a quick kiss at the surface, then another lungfish, the quiet long bodies that thread mud like fat ropes. They'll sit through seasons you can't cocooned in their own dry sleep, and wake snappish if your step caves the roof of their burrow. You learn to read for chimneys, little damp holes rimmed with tougher mud, where a buried lungfish keeps its straw to the world. Where you see chimneys you tiptoe or better detour. Nobody enjoys having their bedroom ceiling kicked in, especially not a creature with a bite and an opinion. A mainstream truth settles into your bones. African lungfish can survive dry months by burrowing into mud and forming a protective cocoon, breathing air and waiting out the thirst, then reanimating the moment rain edits the map. You treat any patchwork of cracked mud with respect bordering on religion because your heel plus their patience equals a fast, stinging lesson. You've learned to press the surface with your stick first. If it sinks with a soft sigh and the earth seems to breathe back, you move. Not all electricity belongs to storms. Somewhere in these lineages lurk quiet batteries, electric catfish, barrel-bodied and smooth, capable in their modern cousins of stunning, the inattentive with a jolt you feel in your elbows. Whether tonight's basin hosts that exact trick, you behave as if hands off any too calm shapes under overhangs, and no reaching into holes you haven't announced with your stick first. Light joke 2. If hydration was a team sport yesterday, today the opposing side brought tasers. You study the gulp dialect the way you studied crocodile slides. A single lazy surface kiss every few minutes. Lungfish catching air, no rush. A rapid series of gulps, followed by a boil and a scatter of little fish catfish feeding swarm under. A sudden explosive thwop tight to your shin, that's your cue to be elsewhere. You also read bubbles that look like beads shaken from a bracelet. Fine rising quick, often the aftermath of a hidden swipe into silt. When the beads pop near your toes vote to live somewhere else. Birds write footnotes in the margins. Kingfishers patrol like blue-green punctuation. When they hover and refuse to dive, something big just below has spooked the bait. Egrets step, halt, then give the world the side eye. If 3 egrets do this in a row, you treat that lane as occupied. Cormorants surface with a shake, then swim flat and low. When they pop up faster than usual with a surprised cough, you assume they bumped a whiskered jaw that was not in the mood. You adopt ankle etiquette. Mud stays thin and even, not caked, so you can feel without snagging. You wrap a leaf strip once around each ankle, just enough to make skin look less like grubs, mostly to make you feel better. You step where light reaches the bottom and skip the shadow lips under grass mats. Mouths love the edge where silt meets stems. When you must cross a darker tongue of water, you guide the youngest behind you to step in your exact prints. An echo train, where each footfall edits the risk a little smaller. Light joke 3 congratulations, you're inventing a new dance, toe-tography. Fringe tidbit time, whispered like gossip in later folk tales. Far downstream, people will say that when lungfish gulp loudly at dusk, rain will follow. That mud-breathing means clouds will too. You don't chart omens, you chart exits. Still, when the shallows whoomp and the air tastes like metal, you do glance upriver and double-check your high ground, because superstition is just a way of making sure you did the practical thing. The shallows also trap feet, the way rumors trap afternoons. Fine silt lies over a jelly layer, and a single hard pull to free an ankle makes the water see you. Instead, you learn the twist and lift rotate gently to break suction, then slide out sideways. You teach it to the small ones with a game in safe sand, humming the rhythm until their heels obey. You don't splash. Splashes call committee meetings you didn't schedule. Historians still argue whether shoreline foraging crabs, mollusks, fish, scooped from shrinking pools furnished a crucial share of early ancestors' calories, or whether it's a romantic retelling pasted onto a more generalist diet. You don't weigh percentages, you weigh ankles versus dinner. But you notice how rich a shell heap smells when you crack it salt iron, the faint sweetness of algae, and how good the tubers taste after you rinse them in a seep away from the open lip. Risk buys flavor, caution buys tomorrow. Tactics accrue like charms. You favor riffles that chatter large fish, dislike bumping pebble tongues. You move sooner when turbidity climbs. Fresh cloudiness can mean a big body just nosed the bottom. You cue off wind lines, a cross breeze that ruffles an otherwise glassy sheet. Might be harmless, but a smooth lane carved through that ruffle can be a moving back the water parting around a fish that isn't sharing. You keep your gourd on a cord so a curious suck won't steal it. You learned that one the wet way, and decided you didn't enjoy the punchline. Sometimes you must commit. A fig grove on the far side glows with promise, and the only crossing is a murky braid full of whispers. You send the bold with a long branch, each sweeping ahead in small arcs to announce. They step heel light and toe feeling 3 paces per breath. A catfish nuzzles the stick says no. A lungfish chimney gapes underfoot. You detour 2 body lengths. The water talks gulps, tiny clatters, the soft, brushing sound of whiskers in silt, and you answer in a language of angles and patience. When you finally climb the far bank, the reed smell sloughs off on the breeze, and the ground feels so solid it's practically opinionated. You sit with your feet in sun and let the warmth erase the memory of suction. The sentinel counts heads, then the gourds, then the shells, then the jokes. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, someone murmurs, and the group groans happily. A ritual that says we're still here. Please let it stay boring for an hour. You file the lesson under invisible mouths. Catfish teach you to love gravel and clarity and the discipline of quiet feet. Lungfish teach you to respect bedrooms you cannot see. The shallows look like the easiest water in the world. They're actually a negotiation with appetites and patience. Tomorrow, the tea-colored lane will be back, whispering it's fine. You'll answer the way you always do, with a stick. A head a joke in your pocket and ankles that prefer their current inventory. Reeds close around you like fingers through hair, whispering in 1,000 dry S-shapes. You keep your stick low and your steps lower, sliding the soles rather than lifting. Because in this corridor, the danger isn't a splash. It's the quiet curl of something that writes in muscle instead of ink. The air smells green and damp with a thread of mud metal from yesterday's storm. Dragonflies fence with each other over narrow runnels. Frogs rehearse their one-line plays. Every rustle gets a vote. Some are wind, some are you. Some are scales deciding whether you are worth the effort. You read the reeds first. Twisted stalks show where heavy bodies coiled and left a shallow helix in the bent culms. Shed skins' pale stockings snagged on stems flutter at ankle height, telling you who has passed exams in growing. You aim for the hummocks, the little islands of root where visibility buys you half a heartbeat. Between hummocks, the water braids dark and slow. That's the lane a longbody likes. You move like a rumor no one can quite quote. A soft shh to your left, and the reeds emboss themselves with a passing shape. You freeze, then become persuasive stone. The stick angles across your body, ready to nudge. Not jab, never jab, because jabbing makes stories short. A blunt push announces your existence without promising you're edible. The reed line relaxes. A head rises, tongue-tasting black ribbon split at the tip. Flick flick, sending air to the Jacobson's organ, that nose behind the mouth that doesn't need words to read a paragraph about you. You offer boring, mud-scented, still not flailing. Boring is survival's favorite flavor. This is python country and cobra country, a Venn diagram drawn in cattail ink. The big ambusher hugs the ground, African rock python-style swamp brown with chevrons thicker than your thigh, where it wants to be. It likes edges, the reed/waterline, the hummock/bank seam. The cobra thinks semi-aquatic lineage keeps its head higher, eyes bright, neck ready to hood body coursing like a rope pulled by tide. One raps, one writes with chemistry. Either turns an ankle into a lesson you won't enjoy. Mainstream fact for your pocket pythons don't have venom. They're constrictors relying on power and patience, with heat-sensing pits along the labial scales that notice warm things that forget not to be near. Cobras are elapids venom specialists. The water-loving kinds in later ages, banded and Congo water cobras, take fish and amphibians with fast, precise strikes, their toxins aiming at nerves more than blood. You don't know the family tree's Latin, but you've learned that the heavy ground-hugging S means don't blunder, and the higher searching S means stay taller than you feel. The reed bed offers you a few small advantages. Vibration travels. A low, steady slide of your feet tells hidden coils that you're coming, and most snakes prefer to be somewhere else when a large, clumsy primate arrives wearing clay number 5. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Still not trending. Your noise budget here is the opposite of crocodile corridors. Soft and continuous beats, sudden and loud. You become a weather pattern, predictable, uninteresting, soon to pass. Light joke, one whispered so the reeds don't tattle. You are not clumsy. You're providing courtesy vibrations. You borrow other people's alarms. Weavers nested in papyrus explode into a papery cloud when their lines are crossed by a long, low shape. Cisticolus buzz squeak, then go pin-drop silent when a hood rises. That silence is louder than thunder. If the frogs in one pocket fall off, beat all at once, you treat the gap like a drawn blade on the ground. Your eyes and ears are yours. Your chorus is outsourced. You keep your hands where your stories live. No reaching into reed mats for that perfect tuba. You use the stick like a long finger rolling stems aside before you commit your ankles. When you must cross a dark runnel, you find a place where reeds thin, then step on the shadow of your stick, first letting its pressure do the asking. The youngest learn the reed code. Early, palms closed, fingers tucked, no. What's this in holes that belong to teeth? Fringe tidbit time. In later centuries, some reed fishers along far rivers will tie a thin bundle of green stalks and set it floating as a decoy. The legend says cobras will strike the quivering shadow and exhaust their theater before a human slips past. Whether or not the trick works, you carry its spirit. Let the first curious bite meet something that isn't you. The python introduces itself by absence, a sudden quiet in cricket land, a stillness shaped like a coil under a dry fan of reeds, and then the faintest rearrangement of geometry when your shadow crosses its pattern. You back your shadow away first, body second. You have learned the difference between curiosity and trespass. A python at rest is a boundary. A python in motion turns borders into opinions. You offer it room as if it were a boulder with preferences. A mainstream behavioral note holds your posture steady. Snakes don't have ears like yours, but they feel vibrations through belly and bone. They see motion more than shape. Many are reluctant to waste energy on anything too big to swallow or too dangerous to argue with. You become, to the best of your acting ability, a large, unhelpful idea. Historians still argue whether fear of snakes, the snake detection theory, sharpened primate vision and attention in deep time training eyes to catch the oblique curve and the sudden straight strike. Tonight you don't settle the debate. You settle your gaze. You scan not for whole animals, but for the wrong curve in a pile of right angles, the too clean shadow in messy thatch, the mouth-shaped space where reeds quit being reeds. Your toolkit grows longer than your stick. A foot wrap of crushed aromatic leaves goes on under the mud. Not because snakes hate the scent, debatable, but because it makes you feel like you're doing something civilized. You keep a pocket of ash to dull the shine on your ankles when light slips through the reeds like a nosy eel. You move the group in a line, tight enough that everyone steps in softened places, loose enough that one startle doesn't topple all. Light joke too. Congratulations, you've invented conga, but quiet. Venom lives in your mental map as geometry. Distance is mercy. A hood raised 2 spear lengths away is theater you can applaud by leaving. If you surprise one closer than that, your fault or the reeds, you angle your body so a strike meets stick and air, not thigh. You give it sight lines, no cornering, no blocking the easy retreat to water, no big gestures. The show ends faster when the audience behaves. Now and then you find signs after the fact, a faint twin scrape on damp silt where a cobra's belly scales left Morse code, a smooth oval depression like a seated bowl where a python spent a patient hour. You mark those with a palm print and turn them into stories later by fig drum, where to hush, where to step tall, where to carry the smallest. Repetition turns fear into choreography. You're not banishing fear, you're giving it good manners. A mainstream fact to steady the pulse, most bites happen when someone steps on or handles a snake. You excel at neither. Your ankles make friends by not introducing themselves. You teach the small ones the broom step heel, down, sweep, toe, down, so anything hidden feels the nudge before it feels the insult. If a reed tugs at your leg like a kitten with bad ideas, you glance down before you brush it away. Light joke. 3 for morale. If a reed tickles your calf and you yelp, That's not panic. That's advanced calf-based echolocation. Now the path opens onto a narrow bar of sand, a clearing the size of a blanket between reed walls. You pause where short grass shows you full sentences, the S tracks of last night's traveler, the bird scratch punctuation of a breakfast club. Your own footnotes overlapping like a friendly edit. The breeze turns and cools your mud, bringing you the faint musk that is neither crocodile nor hippo, a herpetological cologne. You nod at the empty air and thank it for being empty. You step on following a ribbon of papyrus that leads toward figs and the kind of dry ground that has nothing to say about you. Behind the reeds, close with their usual stage whisper, reprising the scene after the actors have left. You carry the rules forward, slide the feet, nudge with the stick, let alarms outsource, your eyes give room to coils and theatre to hoods. Tomorrow there will be more reeds, more rustles, more decisions. You'll meet them with clay number 5 courtesy vibrations and the practiced art of being the most boring thing in a very interesting place. You step out of the reeds with ankles intact and think the worst is over, and that's when the smallest hunters file their paperwork. The waterline smiles, and the smile is microscopic. You don't hear them come aboard, you only feel the itch, later the heaviness a week from now, the thinned breath a season from now. Teeth are honest, parasites are patient. You've learned to fear both, but only one sends a greeting card. You pick the seep over the open lip again, letting water rise through clean sand into your gourd. It looks like safety. You press the surface with your palm and see the light shimmer a trick you perform because it makes you feel responsible, grown up even. Then you remember the rule whispered by elders who learned it from so way clear is not the same as harmless. The lake writes in invisible ink. An hour later, where mud rubbed off your calf, a prickle starts first curiosity, then petition, then complaint. You resist the urge to scratch like you're tuning a drum. You've seen what follows a rash that maps exactly where the water kissed you. That's the tiny footprint of a trespass. Mainstream fact for the nightstand, some flukes send free-swimming larvae from their snail landlords, and those little needles of life can pierce mammal skin in seconds. Later, much later, the grown-ups far downstream in time will call part of that saga schistosomiasis. You call it the price of putting skin where snails hold committee. You keep moving upslope to a breeze that edits the gnats off your face. The group settles into a fig drum rest, and you do the small things that are really big. You pour the first gourd of seep water back onto the sand, and take the second, because the patient grains strain more than your eyes ever will. You add a pinch of ash, a trick older than your stories, to make the water taste a fraction less raw, and maybe, just maybe, to irritate a few hitchhikers into minding their own business. Light joke one, congratulations. You've invented artisanal charcoal water with notes of "please don't move in." Invisible hunters come with many doorways. Some prefer your mouth eggs tucked into food or tiny cysts in water that pretend to be nothing, until your stomach's warm, dark says welcome. Some prefer bare soles or shins larvae with knives too small to see. Some mail their children through insects with wings that whine your bedtime soundtrack. Tonight you focus on the waterborne crew, the flukes that negotiate with snails, the protozoa that turn your gut into a fermenter, the worms that argue you into anemia, one small theft at a time. Leeches you can at least file under visible nuisances. They lip at your ankles like tipsy cousins and hold on with good manners and better glue. When you salt them with mud and thumb them off, they leave polite bruises and bad reviews. Mainstream addendum. The reason they steal so smoothly is chemistry. Leeches dribble anticoagulants. Later people will call one of them Hirudien, keeping blood from clotting while they finish dinner. You respect the biochemistry and still opt out of the fan club, but it's the things without faces that tall bodies fear most. Your aunt's aunt once wasted down during a long dry season. Breath, shallow eyes, tired in the morning. No cat had clawed her, no snake had nipped her. She had only lived too close to water for too many years, and let too many tiny mouths sublet rooms in her gut. The elders made a story about it, as elders do, and braided a rule through it: we don't camp where the snails hold festival. You make a habit of reading snail news the way you read crocodile slides. When the reed stems show clusters of small, spiral shells high above the water, the snails have climbed, maybe because the chemistry changed, maybe because something is hunting under the surface. When the lower stems glitter with tiny shells and the mud holds a lot of comma tracks, you mark the place busy and drink somewhere that looks boring. Boring is a theme in your survival brand. Fringe tidbit, because your brain loves odd shelves. Far away, in a much later century, people will wind a long thread-like worm around a stick to draw it out of a blister day after day, turn after turn, slow as patience. The worm had arrived in their water inside tiny crustaceans and made a long, rude journey. You mercifully stick to clay masks and ash sips. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Still a hard pass. Clay number 5 remains undefeated. You choreograph contact like you choreographed crossings. Wading becomes a meeting with an agenda. Keep cuts out of water. Feet slide, don't stomp. Rinse food in seeping sand, not the bowl where everyone drinks. Hands away from eyes and nose until you've scratched them on grass. The reeds approve this message. You teach the little ones that cold tingle after a warm wade means rinse with sand and wait upslope. Scratching is a lovely hobby they can enjoy later on. Bark, not with nails now. Light joke too. Your nails are on a performance improvement plan. You also learn to listen to guts the way you listen to frogs. A sudden chorus of rumbles in the group, a wave of tiredness after small meals, a trend of pale palms. These are signs as real as slide marks. You respond with camp decisions: more time upslope, more roasting tubers until the centers go powdery, more shellfish cracked and rinsed, where the seep bubbles fewer experiments with mystery greens that look like they want to own your intestines. You become a connoisseur of clean smoke and patient boiling. Steam is a lullaby you trust. Historians still argue whether the heavy parasite loads along ancient shores shaped big patterns. Childhood growth rates, weaning ages the size of groups that could share a camp without sharing too much else. The debate lives in bone chemistry and guesswork. You live in bodies. When the youngsters' ribs show, despite decent figs, you shift your roots. When too many cough at dusk, you move your bed farther from any glow worms of standing water. When energy feels taxed by nothing, you can name, you blame the invisible, and take the high path. The wind brings you a clean-edged gift, a scentless slice of air from upslope that isn't flavored by algae at all. You follow it to a shallow rock pan that still holds last night's rain sunlit. And temporary, the best kind of water. You scoop with a leaf. The tiniest dancers in there are different mayfly nymphs, a water strider drawing morse on the surface. This is the kind of drink the elders call sky borrowed, and you take it with gratitude and a mental note: after storms find pans before pools. You also collect anti-parasite lore, even if you don't call it that. Bitter leaves chewed before wading, not for taste, but for the ritual of it. Clay swallowed in a smear when bellies feel wrong. A habit later people will call geophagy. Charcoal rubbed on the inside of a gourd as a temper. Do they all work? Maybe sometimes under certain moons and moods, your dataset is anecdote, and your placebo effect is excellent. But the real medicine is root choice patience with boiling, and the stubborn refusal to itch until skin bleeds. Light joke 3. You've become a health influencer with exactly 3 followers and a strict no raw water selfies policy. Evening finds you counting not teeth, but days until the next rain. Parasites are seasonal bureaucrats. They file more paperwork when pools shrink and everyone crowds the same edges. You make your ledger accordingly, which seep tasted like clean coin, which reed pocket itched afterward, which shell heap smelled a shade too sweet. Memory is your vaccine, stories your booster. Don't splash at the snail festival, you'll mutter at a drowsy child, and they'll roll their eyes and remember anyway. As the fan hum of night builds, you lay down with your back to a root and your face to a breeze that came from nowhere near a pool. Your skin crawls, once habit, not hazard, and then settles as the mud dries into a mosaic. Somewhere in the reeds, frogs count syllables. Somewhere in your gut, negotiations proceed. You fall asleep reciting the quiet catechism of edges clear. Isn't harmless snails mean stories ash after water pans before pools? You've survived another day against enemies too small to admire. Tomorrow the lake will try new letters. You'll answer with old patience. Thunder starts as gossip and ends as policy. First, it's a low murmur upstream like rocks rolling around in a giant's pocket. Then the light leans grey dragonflies shorten their patrols, and the wind flips its script so it comes from water to land in one cool sheet that tastes faintly like metal. You stand still and let skin read what eyes haven't yet, because storms draw maps faster than feet can. The lake's breath thickens. Birds fold their plans and leave you to yours. You lift your chin and study the mouth of the sky. High above a flat anvil tops a swelling cloud, cumulonimbus flexing its underside, bruised green-yellow, where rain fattens. Curtain sills hang from it, verga rain that evaporates before it hits ground, but not for long. Your nose gets there first, that earthy sweet note, with a spark behind it. Mainstream fact for the pocket petrichor. The smell when rain meets dry soil comes from plant oils and a molecule called geosmin, brewed by soil bacteria and launched into the air when drops hit. Your brain files it under delicious warning. The elders taught you the flood catechism debris lines on trunks mark where the brown wall reached. Camp always above that necklace. Dry channels are not roads. They are promises waiting to be kept by upstream rain you cannot see. The thunder now sharpens from rumble to drumbeat, spaced like deliberate footfalls. You turn from the low oxbow you attempted to cross, and mark 3 exits to higher ground, a rib of rock, a fig ledge with root ladders, and that termite citadel. The height of 2 tall bodies, sturdy as gossip. The first raindrops are scouts, great cool coins that slap dust into dark polka dots. You let them dot your clay numb. 5. Remember, crocodile dung sunscreen is still not the look and keep moving because first rain carries oils and silt, and sometimes the wide-eyed panic of small things running down slope. Wind pushes a white skitter across the lake. Beyond it, a darker smear rips toward you. The surface hardens into hammered tin, then boiling sesame. You taste electricity where tongue meets teeth. Light joke 1, you make the executive decision to postpone all ankle-related adventures until further notice. When the wall of rain reaches the far hills, everything upstream starts to move. Branches, seed heads, old nests, the entire to-do list of last season. In dry gullies you hear the clatter begin, pebble on pebble, the signature of water you can't yet see. You warn the group with a hand-flat palm slice across the body, the sign for no channels, no shortcuts. Feet aim for convex ground, not concave. Bellies prefer rock ribs over soft margins. The youngest ride shadows between elders' knees, learning the choreography of retreat without panic. Long breath, long step. Eyes up. You pass a trunk banded with mud, a dried ruffle at your shoulder height, the high tide mark from a storm you didn't meet. That necklace on the bark is law. You imagine the wall of brown water thick with silt and sticks, lumbering with hippo dung and reeds, starved of oxygen and mercy, arriving with the self-esteem of a boulder. Drowning here isn't the deep cinematic kind. It's the surprise kind, the one that steals a foot, then a knee, then the part of your breath that makes the rest useful. You commit to dignity and high ground in that order. A mainstream flood truth keeps your pace smugly steady. Flash floods can arrive under blue local sky because the sky up catchment is not yours. The lake basin is a gossip network of ravines and runnels that hold their tongues until the exact second they don't. You listen for the moment when rain drum turns to roar, when a new voice joins the storm, a low, continuous grinding that is not thunder. That's the brown wall finding its feet. Birds call the play. Sand grouse lift and bend toward open country. Weaver nests bob, but hang on. If any tear free and ride the flow, you assume the channel below is beginning to carry. A hyrax screams from a fig ledge offended by rain or by physics. Dragonflies vanish altogether. Their absence is louder than their wings. You keep the group angled to the termite citadel until the first coffee-colored sheet snakes along the base of the reeds and tries to make your route its riverbed. You step up onto the mound's root-buttressed slope. Wet clay under your toes is slicker than jokes in panic, so you plant the stick like a third leg and go 3-point, then belly slide the last body length with all the grace of a tired fish. From there, vision expands. Channels that were light brown sand a minute ago are now dark brown runnels, then streams. The lake's rim fattens. The color goes from copper to chocolate. The air drops a degree. The world smells less like geosmin and more like shredded plant. Lightning writes erratic, pale grammar in the west. Fringe tidbit file under storm theater you've heard about more than seen waterspouts and violent updrafts can loft small fish and drop them elsewhere. Much later, people will call it raining fish. You watch the wind tear sheets off the lake and decide that if the sky wants your dinner, it can have the catfish. You'll take figs today, thanks. Light joke, too. You are officially off the seafood diet until the sky stops fishing. The brown wall arrives not as a neat front, but as a persuasion across several mouths at once. It heaves a raft's worth of reed and sticks past your former crossing rolls, a log that looked like a nap hazard yesterday, but now looks like a blunt sermon, and slaps a new line of wet-on trunks that already wore 3. You watch for the most dangerous part, bubbles trapped in the soup, turning the surface into a weak skin so a foot can punch through and vanish. The rule holds convex is life. You take inventory. The small ones are tight under an elbow and a root shelf. The sentinel is counting without moving lips. Your own breath rides a slow 4-count steadied by work. You sip from a leaf that caught clean rain in the notch of the mound, sweet and temporary. The sky borrowed water you trust more than any pool made by rivers with opinions. You remind your hands to be busy in useful ways, tightening gourd cords, redistributing shell tools so no one leans too far, pulling a smear of clay over the gleam on a wrist. Tiny things matter when big things are performing. Historians still argue whether flood memories from deep time seeded later deluge stories, or whether flood myths rise independently wherever rivers have tempers. Maybe both. You don't trace myths. You trace escape routes. But when lightning backlights the papyrus and the world looks exactly like a tale would describe it, angry water and a stubborn speck of life clinging to a high place, you feel the story writing itself in your bones. Tomorrow, when the fig drum thumps, this will be a rule with jokes braided in. When the peak passes, and it always does, even if it takes part of the shoreline with it, you wait for a beat longer than your impatience prefers. Water recedes like someone backing out of a narrow doorway with too many packages. Channels turn from roar to loud mutter. You test the slope below with the stick soft and sliding stay. Firm and rough, maybe. You descend in diagonals, never straight, because wet clay loves a straight optimist. The world is rearranged, new cutbanks, new sand tongues, old paths, erased fresh ones, offered like gossip that might be true. After storms come gifts with teeth. Stranded pools glitter with fish you could scoop by hand if the mud didn't want your ankles more. You choose the ones with gravel bottoms and a clear way out. You leave the glossy brown saucers that sit right under a new undercut, because ambush geometry doesn't retire just because the weather clocked out. You crack shells while steam sings off hot stones, grateful for protein the sky didn't keep. Light joke 3. You're opening a pop-up restaurant called Post-Flood Specials. 2 stars for ambiance, 5 for caution. A mainstream sediment note hums in your head even if you never say it aloud. The layers this storm laid coarse first, then finer, will press into the future as a thin memory, a page in mudstone that someone without your bruises will read. Floods are editors with heavy pens. They cut old paragraphs and write new ones in a single long sentence. You will annotate tomorrow with your toes until the map makes sense again. By late light, the sky washes its face blue and contrite. Frogs audition for the night band. Termites make their flying candle debut in the damp air, and the youngest chase them with delighted mouths. You let them rains bring crunchy gifts that don't bite back. The fan hum comes from a real fan now, the wind threading clean through fig leaves. You lay your back to warm bark and your front to the breeze, inventorying what the storm took a path, a sandbar, and what it gave Pan's fish a rule repeated. Sleep arrives like a truce. You fold the flood catechism into the soft place behind your eyes, read the sky. Trust debris, necklaces never camp in promises, love, convex, ground, sip, sky, borrowed, wait longer than you want. Storms come and go with the authority of old landlords. You remain by keeping your rent paid in attention. When thunder rolls again far away, it sounds less like threat and more like someone rearranging furniture in a room you no longer occupy. You turn your face to the cooler air, smile a little at your own survival, and let the last drops stitch the evening closed. The lake writes its neat, shiny script at the edge, but just beyond that tidy line, the handwriting turns messy. Thickets, hippo-cut corridors, and mud that smiles politely and steals your ankles. You angle in under brush that catches in your hair like nosy fingers, choosing the narrow way because the open shore is having an argument with teeth. The air smells of sap and damp paper. Thorn hooks those wait-a-bit personalities. Ask you to reconsider your life choices. You keep your stick low, your feet lower, and your jokes on mute. This is the place where the ground lies. Hippopaths look like invitations, smooth, sunken runways through reed and shrub, shoulder-wide sloped just so. They're also two-way streets for several tons of opinion returning to water at dusk. You read them the way you read crocodile slides, edge polish, fresh mud smear. A recent biscuit of dung to one side like a currently in use sign. If the track holds pooled water with little ripples and no insects skating something big, passed very recently. You step parallel, not insid, as if the path were a river and you preferred your ankles unsupervised. Beyond the path, the thicket knits itself into green rooms. Visibility pinches. Every sound is too close to name. You place your soles like stamps, heel-light toes, reading. A patch of ground ahead looks pale, cake-like, almost friendly, a crust of silt dried by yesterday's sun. Your stick presses and the surface dimples, then frowns. You recognize the false bottom root mat and dust-hiding porridge. You never argue with porridge. 2 sideways steps and your shin is still your shin, not a ladle. Mainstream fact for your inner scientist: quicksand and sucking mud don't swallow you whole. They're water-saturated sediments that lose strength when agitated. You float if you keep lungs full and spread weight, and you escape by moving slowly to let water slip back between grains. Panic is the accelerant. You practice your sermon, long breath, slow twist, lift sideways. You taught it to the small ones in safe sand as a game. Out here it's choreography with consequences. You meet all the lies the ground tells. There's the raft, an innocent lawn of fine sedge over a pocket of chocolate pudding. There's the window, thin baked skin, with a careful oval where a hoof punched through and didn't come back fast, framed by scrabbled edges. There's the plug, a disc of cracked mud that sighs when your stick circles at a cork over something you don't want to decant. Your feet learn to love ugliness. Wrinkled clay, pebble, chatter, root bumpy that feels rude but honest. Light joke 1 5 stars for traction. 0 for comfort, just how survival likes it. Predators read mud too. A set of big cat prints skips along the firm margin toes, splayed slightly where weight shifted. Someone heavy tested the edge and thought better of it. Another track, a saber-toothed cousin, stops at a hippopath turns and writes a patient circle in dust. You feel watched by geometry, not by eyes. In this zone, hunters push hopes toward puddings, panic a gazelle into the soft let physics. Arrest it, then collect. You are not a gazelle, you are a committee and a stick. Still, you give the soup a wide berth and keep brush between you and any elegant ideas with claws. A fringe tidbit to slip in your pocket, people far from here centuries from now will lash bundles of reeds under their feet. Poor man's snowshoes for bogs to spread weight and cross floating mats. You borrow the spirit, if not the tech, when you must step on suspect ground. You set your gourd down, your shell kit down, even pride down, and cross lighter. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Still a no. Clay no. 5 remains the only fashion statement you can afford while tiptoeing on porridge. Hippopaths cross hips-deep cuts where rain sought shortcuts. You crouch to read the walls, clean knife marks from claws, a glitter of fish scales pasted by last flood. A quiet ooze that makes the clay look like it's thinking. A mosquito drills your forearm and files a flight plan. You waive the fee and smear more mud. Mosquito Union not impressed. Light joke 2. Your skincare routine now includes exfoliate with panic. The false bottom trick shows up in shallow water too. A sand tongue projects into a backwater like a polite bridge. Your stick sinks to the grip. Bubbles gossip up like beads. That's organic mush under a thin, sunny veneer, decays stew with a crust. The young watch your demonstration press. Wait. Watch for the bead string. Choose a gravel alternative even if it costs you minutes. Minutes are cheap, ankles are legacy. Mainstream field note, hippo highways aren't just animal infrastructure. Whole wetlands are rearranged by them. Those trenches drain and fill, redirecting water, inviting vegetation here and denying it there. Later scientists read their signatures in aerial photos. You read them with calves and patience, knowing a neat path at noon becomes traffic at dusk. You schedule your day accordingly. Hydrology is your boss. Hippos are middle management. Thicket physics add grab to sink. Thorn scrapes polite lines on your shins. Liana's green cables with a sense of humor loop low and snag your toes just as the ground softens. You learn the lower hand, higher head posture. One hand guarding shins, one forearm ahead to brush hooks aside. Chin up just enough to keep eyes on angles. You keep group spacing like beads on a slack string, close enough to help far enough that one stumble doesn't flip you all into a comedy. Light joke 3 from above, you look like a conga line for people who hate music. You test depth with more than wood. A flat stone tossed gently should thud and bounce. If it whoomph and vanishes, you throw a second elsewhere and change plans. You watch for breathers' tiny ring bubbles that rise in a rhythm from certain patches. Gas escaping through mud can mean decay and voids. It can also mean something living underfoot, angry about ceilings. Either way, the patch gets a nickname, maybe Nope, and a place on the mental map. Historians still argue whether late Miocene kin of yours spent much time in swampy margins like this by choice or only under duress, and whether such trap-filled edges nudged bodies toward brief, upright bursts, those periscope steps, or whether that's tidy storytelling painted onto messy evolution. You don't settle it. You do what works when thorns steal your peripheral vision. You rise a little for a few strides to read the ground ahead. When mud threatens to adopt your calves, you widen your stance, slow your breathing, and become a floating idea until your feet remember how to be feet again. You collect tells. A thin frosting of dried clay atop darker, damp morning sun did that. Under it is tired porridge. Ant traffic in tight lines over a patch others avoid. Underneath might be wet where their feet hate to be. A fern clump greener than its neighbors, blades glossier sand around it uncracked. There's seepage below feeding it, where plants drink your heel might drown. Out here, botany is a rumor about geology that your ankles can verify. When the thicket finally relents, and you step on to high, wind-brushed ground, the relief is comic. Even the thorns seem apologetic, waving as if they didn't just compose a symphony on your legs. You inventory the lesson while you flex each foot like a grateful puppet. Ugly ground is honest. Pretty crusts are liars. Hippopaths are highways, not sidewalks. Predators test edges because edges help predators test you. You rinse mud from fingers at a sky-borrowed puddle trapped in a fig root and refuse the larger, browner bowl with the charming reflection nearby. You're dating safety now. It's a steady relationship. You settle with your back to bark and your front to a breeze that smelled no algae on the way in. The group arranges itself in lazy commas, each comma with an exit, each exit with a plan. Far off the lake argues gently with stones. Frogs audition again for night band. You scratch one thorn welt against a scuffed trunk and stop at one because you remember parasites enjoy editorial input on scratches. Your stick rests across your knees like a period at the end of a complicated sentence. Sleep arrives with the pleasant weight of dry feet. The traps will reset overnight. The porridge will pretend to be cake again. The hippo runs will fill with evening opinions and morning quiet. Tomorrow you'll read the ground's lies with new eyes, and the same old toes sliding, pressing, twisting, and rising where you must. Clay number 5 will return. Crocodile dung sunscreen will remain a fashion faux pas, and you'll keep loving gravel more than aesthetics. The lake writes messy between the lines. You've learned to read messy in second person, one careful step at a time. Night bunches at the water's edge, and your eyes retire early while your ears sign up for overtime. The lake hushes itself into a black mirror. Reeds breathe, frogs keep time. You settle on a hummock upslope from the drinking lip, a shoulder-width terrace, with 2 exits memorized and 1 sentinel's seat rubbed smooth by 100 careful nights. Your posture says statue, your breath says cloud. The rule here is simple. You don't see first, you hear first. Apex predators own low light. You borrow the spotlight for sound. The group arranges into commas, never periods. The smallest comma fits between 2 legs. The sentinel's job rotates, but tonight it's yours. Knees under chin, spine, long weight on the balls of your feet, stick angled so a twitch turns to a pivot. Words go on vacation. You talk in air and bone. A slow exhale means still good. 2 short breaths through the nose mean something moved. A soft tongue click points the clock, 1 for left, 2 for right, 3 for behind. It's not language, it's choreography. You are the conductor of a whisper orchestra that prefers never to play fortissimo. From the dark flank of the valley comes a long question mark note. Who? Rising and falling like a saw across night. Hyena. The sound hangs, then repeats closer, twined with the pad of many careful feet. Mainstream truth to clear the old myth. Hyenas aren't just scavengers. They're formidable hunters that run things down in teams, crack bones afterward, because waste is for amateurs. You feel the trot in the ground before you hear it in the air. 4 beat, then a pause, then a ripple of quiet conversation made of breath. Hyenas approach water with the nonchalance of regulars. They don't love surprises, though, and you plan not to be one. You keep your outline broken behind a palmetto fan. You watch for eye-shine a low amber pear that sways as if attached to a shrug. Tapetum lucidum. The night mirror behind the retina throws their gaze back at any scrap of starlight, a little burnt caramel coin in the dark. You do not answer with your own shine. Mud dulls your wrists. Clay number 5, still superior to that crocodile dung sunscreen, thanks scumbles your ankles to matte. Then a new sentence writes itself on the sand, silence, shaped like cat. The frogs cut a beat, and in the hole where their music was, you hear the hush of whiskers on sedge. Something longer than your shadow, and quieter than your patience, fences the lip of the waterhole, testing the geometry you used at dusk. Paths ramps the fine line between drinker and dinner. Saber-toothed cousins walked these Miocene nights. Think Machairodus, a low-bodied ambusher with a head shaped for authority. You won't say the name. You'll read the style-weight set 4 feet patient tale, forgetting it exists. Your ears draw a map hearts can read. Pebble ticks under claw front heavy feline. Reed tails whisper against fur-side, approach not straight in. A single exhale, almost a sigh, confidence. You slide 1 finger across your thigh, keep. Still. The sentinel signal drifts behind you like a moth, 2 nose breaths and a downward press of the palm cat at lip. The group shrinks by a thumb width, not a yard. Panic travels like fire. You let it stay cold. Light joke 1, a breath behind your teeth. Welcome to the only nightclub where the bouncers eat the clientele. Hyenas and cat nose, the same calculus waterholes braid truce and betrayal. The hyena is thread left of the cat, who prefers a dead angle against a cut bank. You keep your chin high enough to let ears work low enough to keep teeth out of moonsheen. The moon itself is a thin coin tonight. On fat silver nights, activity changes. Some prey see better. Some predators time their runs. Many creatures adjust like they read a calendar. You do too. On bright nights, you drift farther upslope and let thirst wait. On dark coins like this, your ears stay paid up. A quirky, lovely distraction rolls past your toes, a dung beetle no larger than your thumbnail, wrestling a perfect fig-scented sphere across sand like a tiny planet. It climbs the hummock, stops, and performs a headstand atop the ball, its little survey of the sky. Later naturalists will prove the oddity some dung beetles navigate by the Milky Way, keeping straight lines at night by using starlight as a compass. You grin without teeth. Even janitors need a star chart. The cat decides first. A whisper of muscle releases, and the reeds to your right sign their agreement with a swish. No charge, just a relocation and edit. The hyenas follow their own script, sniffing the drinking lip, so their whiskers write an essay on recent visitors. Your ears catch soft lap, lap, then pad, pad, then a clink like teeth on bone someplace beyond the ridge. That's your cue to sip from the sky-borrowed puddle in your fig root bowl, not the big mirror below. Thirst negotiates, foolishness pays retail. Mainstream physiology note you can feel without a textbook. Your ears widen their aperture at night, head tilts become a scanning dish, and you learn the trick of listening to reflections. Sound off water comes a shade brighter, sound through reeds a shade softer. You triangulate a hyena, giggle, the anxious higher one, and put it well away from the heavier throaty huff of a cat. Your hands stay idle but ready. The stick is not a spear, it's a rudder for your body. Historians still argue whether your kin at this time kept habitual sentinels, the way later primates do, and whether distinct alarm calls for cat snake and raptor had already begun their long apprenticeship toward language. Maybe your clicks are proto-words. Maybe they're just percussion with good timing. You don't write the grammar. You write the outcome still bodies shared direction, and a ripple of readiness that doesn't become stampede. A croc breaks the surface with a muffled gloop just to remind everyone that the waterhole has a third landlord. The cat freezes the hyena's paws. Even the frogs respect the punctuation. You almost laugh, which would be rude. Night is a committee meeting with too many chairs. Light joke 2 minutes will not be published. Time stretches like wet leather. Your calves buzz from holding the same angle. Every small sound gets a resume. Cricket sawing fine. A single pebble clicking against another. Problem weight moved. A moth's wings batting your ear. Annoying also proof the air is not being cut by something larger. The smallest stirs behind you. A young one scratches an ankle, then stops. Remembering Parasite's love edits, you grant one mercy. Scratch yourself against bark once. Negotiations continue. When the hyenas finally drift down slope, your ears register it first. The pad dissolves into sand hush, then into nothing. The cat melts the other way, 1 breath's worth at a time. You wait the extra weight 20 long heartbeats because predators leave echoes of intention. You let those fade too. Then the group loosens by inches. Ankles uncurl. A gourd passes hand to hand with the gravity of a ceremony. Everyone takes air like they've earned it, which they have. You fold the night curriculum for later retelling by fig drum whoops mean patrol, giggles mean tension, heavy hush mean cat. Eyeshine isn't a dare, it's a doorbell. Moon coins change timetables. Water coughs get first right of way. You polish the hand signs until they feel like bones. And you keep one nice superstition in your pocket because it works the quiet hand on a friend's back that says, I'm here. It's not science. It's glue. Light joke 3 as shoulders drop. Welcome to Apex Ear's weekly subscription includes anxiety better maps and the occasional dung beetle astronomy column. Dawn doesn't rise so much as loosen. The black mirror turns graphite, then pewter. Birds wind their springs and start flinging syllables downhill. You stand and your knees complain like elders with weather sense. Your ears clock out, your eyes clock in. The lip of the waterhole wears fresh notes prints in soft crescents, 2 amber dots of vomit bug beetle sheen, a small neat ripple where a croc signed the minutes. You erase your own presence with a palm leave the rest for the next reader, and step back into daylight with a debt paid to vigilance and a balance of luck still in the black. Morning pours tin light along the lip of the lake, and your stomach votes louder than your nerves. You've paid your subscription to Apex Ears Weekly. Now it's time for shoreline brunch, strict dress code, quiet feet, no splashing sentinel on duty. You start where risk is lowest, and calories are honest plants that hide their starch under mud and dare you to be patient. You walk the sedge fringe until your toes read a firm rib under the mush, a root run. The stick goes in at an angle, levering up. A pale cylinder, bearded with fine hairs. Cattail rhizome, sweet wet sawdust on the tongue once you roast it past gummy. Beside it, a fatter knob comes free from darker muck tiger nut sedge. Cyperus doing you a kindness in the form of nutty marbles. You scrape both clean with a shell and rinse them in a seep, not the open bowl, because you remember last night's minutes and the standing agenda item called teeth. Light joke 1, your toolkit is 2 rocks, 1 shell, and unreasonable optimism, and somehow that's still a full kitchen. You build a palm-sized fire on gravel, never in reed roots, wait until it's coals, then tuck tuber slices into warm sand at the edge. The group already knows the rule roast until powdery, not chewy. Chewy remembers parasites. Mainstream fact to keep you smug, cattail and sedge rhizomes are starch warehouses, and across ages and continents, people treat them like a swamp pantry supermarket of the marsh, later mouths will say. You don't recite ethnobotany, you just turn slices and enjoy the steam that smells like clean bread. Protein lives under stones that pretend they're furniture. You pick a riffle that chatters honest sound and slide fingers under a flat rock, while the stick lifts the front edge. Something cold and jointed backs away with attitude. Freshwater crab. You learn the grip that respects everyone's dignity. Thumb on the back, fingers at the sides, claws pointed away from all future plans. Crabs come with their own jokes, pinch first, regret later, and a great party trick, drop a claw in a fight and grow it back over time. Fringe tidbit for your pocket. Many crabs can regenerate lost limbs between molts. They're rude but persistent, like hunger. You thank this one for its donation and park it in a leaf basket, where it can do no theatre. Next aisle, mollusks. Freshwater mussels sink themselves like coins in brown felt, leaving just a whisper of a siphon hole. You wiggle toes in gravel until you feel the flat oval of a shell and pry it free with your stick. Rinse at the seep carry to the anvil rock and do the oldest kitchen move you know. 1 hammerstone's tap at the hinge, 2 if the first one lied, then steam on hot leaves till the mussel relaxes. You don't eat near the snail festival you've seen what tiny hitchhikers can edit into a life, but river mussels from moving water are safer when treated like royalty and steam. Your sentinel counts while you work because buffets this good attract reviewers with claws. A heron stands downstream watching the same riffle you do. When its neck goes from relaxed question mark to capital I, you freeze. The birds write margin notes for your cookbook. If a heron refuses a step, it usually takes you skip it too. Kingfisher hover becomes a yes-no oracle. Jacana traffic tells you where the pads sit on real substrate and where they sit on lies. Hydrology is still the boss. You're just the sous chef with clay number 5 on your wrists. Remember, crocodile dung sunscreen never made the cut. Then there are the minerals your belly doesn't name, but your bones do. Midday heat lofts a different smell from a bare patch near a cutbank, dry, chalk salty like licked stone. You follow it to a mineral lick the color of old bones. Hoofprints pucker the surface. Tooth marks scallop clay where herbivores have nibbled. You rub a pinch between finger and gum, tasting the blunt, thirsty flavor of sodium and calcium, and whatever else the rains dragged from deeper pages. Mainstream fact geophagy. Clay eating shows up in primates across the map. It binds bitter plant toxins and pays tiny mineral debts. You take only enough to remind your chemistry that you're paying attention. The little ones scrunch faces, then ask for seconds. Clay number 5 is now also clay number. For mouths. Fish are a privilege you schedule, not a right you demand. After storms, they strand themselves in pans that can be scooped, but even today you can coax luck with geometry. You don't build grand weirs, too many materials, too much advertisement. But you will sketch a short brush fence in a shrinking braid to push finger-length fish toward a gravel shallows where hands can win. The move is quiet choreography. 2 bodies at the wings, 1 in the center, 1 with a shallow basket to lift. If a broad V-wake slides in from nowhere, the whole dance becomes the slide mark shuffle off the stage, bows later. You honor the no free lunch clause at the waterline. Every reward has a grumpy neighbor. Mussel heaps draw monitor lizards with opinions. Crab-rich riffles draw otters that don't appreciate you cutting the line. Mud-buried tubers share real estate with ankle-deep pythons that admire your focus. So you build a rhythm that the shoreline can tolerate 40 heartbeats of work, 10 of still listening. Rotate the person closest to the lip. Never ever let 2 bodies look down at once. Light joke too if a health and safety inspector existed in the Miocene, They'd fine you for everything except your listening skills, and you'd pay in shells. You keep a pantry map in your head that shifts with season. Dry months tighten the tuber belt, but condense crabs into predictable riffles. Flood months tear out old mussel beds and write new ones 2 bends over. Figs rain sugar for a week, and then ghost you for a month. A shallow mineral lick can turn into soup overnight. So you say the map aloud as you walk small chants of gravel, mouth, willow, screen, 3 hands of clay, because memory spoken is memory strengthened, and a sung pantry is less likely to vanish in an anxious brain. Mainstream debate you carry like a smooth stone. Historians still argue whether shoreline foods, shellfish, crabs, tubers, and the safe fats that lurk in some water places made a decisive contribution to the long arc of hominin diets, or whether they were just seasonal supplements alongside seeds, fruit, and small game. Some even wave at the fringe aquatic ape ideas with cautious eyebrows. Most prefer a mosaic of habitats rather than a single watery origin story. You don't referee. You plate dinner for the people who are hungry now and tell jokes that keep hands steady. Your recipes earn refinement. Tubers taste better sliced thin and flipped twice. Crab legs steam best when you keep the shell on until the last minute. Mussels sweeten when you discard any that smell like yesterday's lightning. Fish dry into travel food when threaded on twigs and smoked over slow, polite coals. You appoint one person to ash water duty and another to smoke management, so no one leans over the lip longer than the shoreline allows. You rotate, you eat, you thank the birds for their editorial help. A small pleasure mineral licks pool company. You don't hate gazelles, warthogs, sometimes a shy antelope that hoards elegance. You watch them step, nibble, step, and you memorize how their hooves test for false bottoms. They are better at it than you. You steal techniques without guilt. Light joke 3. Your professional development plan is now copy ungulates respectfully. By late light, your pockets are smells clean starch, sweet shell, a smoke that will sleep in your hair. The sentinel's shoulders drop by a thumb width. You bury fire embers, rinse hands with sky-borrowed puddle water, and tidy the anvil so tomorrow's you will think well of today's you. A dung beetle rolls past with the world again. You wish it good stars. A kingfisher yodels once and signs off. The lake puts its mirror back on. You lean against bark toes, flexing against honest ground, and list the shoreline truths you've collected, pick riffles over velvet. Roast the starches until they forget their old lives. Trust birds for footnotes. Sip from seeping sand. Take minerals where the earth writes chalk on your tongue. Pay the waterline in attention, and you can charge your day in calories. Whether or not anyone someday writes it into a grand theory today, you ate because plants buried treasure and shells kept secrets, and you listened well enough to be let in. The fan of evening wind starts up soft, regular, generous. You close your eyes to it, already tasting tomorrow's tuber steam, and hearing the tiny clatter of crabs on stone in the dream that comes when a body is fed and the shoreline briefly smiles. You don't always get to live on one side of a problem. Figs flash greener across the channel. The breeze over there smells like dry bark instead of algae. And a cat left its resume on this bank an hour ago. You decide to cross, which is another way of saying you decide to rehearse everything the elders drilled into your bones about time angles and the committee meeting called safety. First, the clock. You choose the hour that makes the water pay daylight, late morning to early afternoon, when glare shows the bottom and ambushers prefer to bask or sulk. You skip dawn and dusk, those elegant mistakes when the world is gorgeous and a bite away from regret. Moon matters too. On fat silver nights you defer. On moon crumb nights you push crossings to sun coins. The wind gets a vote, a small cross breeze that riffles the skin is your friend, because chop ruins mirror tricks and shows you the honest sand under the lies. Then the scouting. One bold body, never alone, steps down the bank diagonally with a stick long as 2 arms. Tap, wait, watch. Toss a tuft of grass and time its drift. How fast which arc? Pinch a pinch of sand at the lip and let it fall. If it vanishes straight down, the edge is undercut and a perfect stage for teeth. If it rolls and catches in rills, the shelf is real. You love rills. You test for the slide mark gospel, no fresh damp ramps, no glittering polish, no domed nest mounds with the perfume of not today. When the water coughs with that soft gloop, you start over at a different place. The route is diagonal, not straight face a little upstream, so the current rights you toward your exit instead of away from it. Your exit is chosen before your toes get wet. A gravel tongue with knee-high scrub behind it, not a slick clay wall that would make celebration into slapstick. You mark 2 backups with eye-thumb distance, just in case the world edits mid-sentence. Light joke 1, congratulations, you've reinvented trip insurance using sticks and anxiety. Rolls make the crossing a braid instead of a tangle. Upstream sentinel on the near bank watches the water's face for wrong shadows. Downstream catcher on the far side plants feet on honesty and becomes a human snag if anyone drifts. 2 midline shepherds enter first, sticks like outriggers, tapping and sweeping feet, sliding to announce without splashing. The smallest ride, high on hip or shoulders, 1 hand on hair for grip, your other hand over their calf like a seat belt. The rest queue exact single file, 2 body lengths apart, eyes on the shepherd's scapula, each foot in the dark print ahead. No one looks down and daydreams. The shoreline loves daydreamers. Mainstream fact that fits the rhythm. Baboons and other primates often post sentinels and coordinate movement with quiet alarms. Apes like chimpanzees wade bipedally through streams, raising torsos to keep chests and tools dry. Little periscope steps that trade speed for sightlines. You borrow the principle, the midline shepherd rises onto hind legs for a few strides at reed pockets to read the next panel of the river, then returns to careful crouch. It isn't swagger, it's geometry for lungs. You enter as choreography, not as optimism. Heels test toes read narrow steps that keep knees bent so shocks die in muscle, not in water. Sticks arc ahead and down, skimming the surface, then pressing into sand to feel for false bottoms and chimneys where lungfish keep straws to the world. If a chimney gapes, you detour 2 body lengths without discussion. If a broad V-wake glides in silence from nowhere, the downstream catcher sings the soft 2-click alarm and everyone lets the sticks drop to the water as if by accident. Stillness follows then, the slide mark, shuffle, backward diagonals only. Pride can sit on the bank and think about its choices. You use a short, quiet fence when the river permits an arm's length of brush laid on the upstream side, parallel with your path just enough to nudge small fish aside and keep eyes on the bigger geometry. No dams, no advertisements, nothing that would turn you into a bulletin for hungry neighbors. The elder's rule recites itself in your ribs. Do nothing that makes the crossing last longer than your breath likes. The youngest learn crossing grammar by imitation. They sing the water alphabet under their breath, riffle good velvet bad. Bright sand, yes, shadow lips, no, and practice the twist and lift that breaks suction if a foot sinks to the ankle. You taught it in safe sand first, a game of freeing trapped heels to a drum. Now it's a quiet miracle repeated as needed. Light joke 2, you promise them river badges for excellence in not drowning. They promise you to accept badges later, preferably dry. You borrow footnotes from other species as you go. Where zebras and gazelles step clean into the opposite bank, neither scrambling nor bogging, you find solid takeoffs. Where they hesitate and cut back, you hesitate too. Ungulates have better contracts with mud than you do. Kingfishers that hover and then refuse to dive mark a lane of sudden doubt. Herons that angle their heads to look through glare tell you where the bottom just vanished. you adjust. The committee expands as needed, everyone edits the map. Fringe tidbit to keep in your pocket, and smile at the Jacana parents you see tiptoeing over lily pads, sometimes fairy chicks tucked under their wings, feet dangling like ridiculous luggage. It's how the marsh invents a family taxi. You copy the spirit, tucking the smallest against your collarbone so their breath prints on your neck and their eyes stay above the fretful line. Halfway, the river tests your rehearsal. A pale oval pops lungfish air, then another. Your lead shepherd lifts a palm halt and lets 3 heartbeats pass so someone below can finish a sentence you don't want to interrupt. A catfish noses a stick. The stick was expecting it and says no with the gentlest push in the world. You keep the sound continuous and boring. Predators love a surprise. You aim to be a weather pattern. Historians still argue whether such role-splitting sentinel shepherd catcher counts as proto-culture in your lineage, or just good instincts doing good work repeated until they look like rules. They debate whether these sessions by brown water pressed your ancestors toward sharper cooperation and cleaner signals. You don't settle it. You cross. And afterward, you tell the story the same way every time so it becomes easier to remember than to forget. Your feet find gravel on the far side and sing it up your bones. The downstream catcher turns into the upstream sentinel for the last 3 bodies, because rivers like last-second plot twists. You climb the bank where scrub offers a screen, and only then allow the laughter that belongs to relief. The little one pats your cheek with a muddy hand and leaves a print you decide to wear all afternoon. Clay number 5 gets a fresh smear crocodile dung sunscreen, still a fashion felony, and gourds get counted like treasure. Mainstream reminder as you inventory crocodilians can and do move between pools, overland portages you've seen as belly drags in damp sand so far. Bank doesn't mean no more teeth, it means new angles. You spend a quiet minute erasing footprints at the exit and brushing the brush back into place. Vanity is for bright feathers. Survival is for smudged evidence. You close the exercise with the Elder's Catechism by fig drum later cross when light shames ambush. Read rills and exits before ankles. Diagonal bodies, bent knees, sentinels in pairs, small ones high, sticks ahead, 2 backups always. Slide mark shuffle rehearsed out loud. Light joke 3. You also propose a new chapter mandatory after crossing nap policy unanimously approved. When the breeze dries your legs and the far side smells like dust and figs, you feel the brain sigh that follows a clean, ordinary risk well managed. You didn't innovate. You imitated the living river and the migrating herds and the long memory in your own calves. Across water that still plans an opinion about your return, you walk into shade with a simple, extravagant victory. Everyone who went in came out. The current writes its long sentence toward afternoon. You shoulder a small one, let their tired head settle under your jaw, and make a quiet promise to remember these steps exactly, so tomorrow's feet don't have to invent them again. You take stock of your body the way you take stock of a shoreline. What here was built on purpose, what here is a lucky accident, and what here turns danger into manageable. Feet go first because they write the day. On firm sand, you feel a little spring under the midfoot, an arch trying to be a bridge storing and handing back a dab of energy each step. On mud, the arch relaxes and your toes spread like small paddles reading firmness, the way fingers read braille. Your big toe is still an independent thinker, happier to grasp a reed or hug a root than to line up like a soldier, but you can coax it into acting like a keel when you take those careful periscope steps above the sedge. You weren't born with a manual, so the landscape wrote one on your calves. Ankles learn the twist and lift that breaks suction. Knees learn to stay unlocked, so shocks die in muscle, not in water. You carry yourself a thumb width taller when you wade, chest-high shoulders, loose arms out just enough that a sudden slip turns into a slow correction instead of slapstick. The elders call it walking, like something that won't apologize to mud. Light Joke 1 posture today is brought to you by the letters S for soft and O for oh no. Skin is your first tool and your last line of diplomacy. The sun writes stern notes on open ground, so you edit with shade and water timing, and with clay number 5, your house brand of mud that cools, dulls shine, and tells mosquitoes to file paperwork elsewhere. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen still not couture. Mainstream fact tucked under your mud stripes. Many mammals use mud as sunscreen and insect armor. Hippos wallow elephants' dust, and your own ancestry leans hard on sweat to cool when the air isn't chewing on you like a wet towel. At the water's lip, humidity blunts sweat's magic, so you schedule hard work for breezy hours and learn to love the long nap under figs. Hands and sticks make one animal. You've turned a branch into an outrigger, a metronome, a question mark. You aim at ground and water before your weight says anything reckless. Fingers have traded claws for precision. Nails are little shovels and scrapers. Thumb pads feel for muscle hinges and tuber skins better than eyes. A fish scale tucked in the palm becomes a tiny mirror for finding eye shine and checking whether your mud mask has betrayed you with a greasy streak that a croc might admire. The toolkit is simple. The choreography isn't. Up the chain hips and back, practice 2 dialects. One is the old language of climbing and clutching flexible spines, strong grasp where toes and fingers both earn their keep. The other is your new favorite phrase, brief, cautious bipedal bursts that lift your eyes above sedge just long enough to read slide marks, riffles, and teeth geometry. You don't do a parade, you do a glance. The pelvis and lower back carry more of your load when you stand. Glute muscles switch on as anchors. The whole machine hums for a few strides and then returns to the 4-limbed efficiency that trees and thickets still demand. Historians still argue whether these short periscope steps nudged the long road toward habitual bipedalism, or whether they're just a clever trick among many in a mosaic of habitats. You don't adjudicate. You use what works and repeat it until it feels like a rule. Teeth and jaws tell their own shoreline story. Starchy tubers gritty with sand. No matter how carefully you rinse, ask for enamel with an opinion. Hard nuts from upland patches ask the same. Many of your cousins wear thicker enamel than sleek fruit specialists. A quiet compromise with a menu that includes roots, shells, and the occasional surprise crunch. Later, much later, someone will read footprints at Laetoli and Crow about arched prints and forward-pointing big toes and teeth that match a hard-working mixed menu. You won't be there to grin, but today you taste the same logic every time a tuber goes from gummy to powdery over coals. Ears and eyes split the night shift. You've trained your hearing to weigh distance and texture. Reeds whisper one way around cat whiskers, another around hyena shoulders. You learned to keep your own outline broken and your reflective bits, wrists, ankles dulled with clay number 5. When the moon fattens, you drift upslope. When it's a coin slice, you edge closer and let your ears spend their wages. The fan hum you asked for at the beginning. Out here, the wind's version makes the same promise, soft, steady. Masking little noises that would otherwise draw unhelpful attention. Thermoregulation is a fancy way of saying, don't cook. You pivot between sunshade and water with the eye of a chef watching a pan. A quick wade cools calves and ankles that slogged through porridge trails. A sit-in cross-breeze under a fig lets sweat do something useful. You keep the little ones' scalps in shadow and paint their shoulders with harmless clay. Even they learn that the midday river is for rinsing tools at the seep, not for cannonballs. Light Joke 2 hydration remains a team sport, but the referee physics takes bribes only in patience. Behavior backs the hardware. Sentinels rotate so no one's nerves fray into uselessness. Hand signs, reed path, mud, crab, cat, croc, tighten into second nature. The slide mark shuffle is now muscle memory in calves and thighs that know diagonals beat straight lines when the world moves. You practice courtesy vibrations in reed beds so snakes don't receive you as a surprise. You train ankles to go mat and minds to go quiet when ripples write ellipses instead of periods. A mainstream fact to tuck into your inner notebook when later humans stride a taut Achilles tendon and long arch store and return energy making distance cheap. Shorter toes reduce the bending forces that wear you out. You aren't a marathoner, you're a shoreline editor. Still, you can feel the hints of that economy in your own spring and in the way your toes argue less with gravel than they did a season ago. Bodies answer practice with fractions of improvement you only notice when you stop tripping where you used to. Quirky tidbit for the fireside. Long after your night along another river entirely, people will try crocodile dung, not as sunscreen, but as an early contraceptive. Let's call that ambitious medicine, and move on gently. Closer to your world, baboons will one day roll leaves into sponges to soak clean water from rock pans, a simple civilized hack you already understand in your bones when you pour the first seep gourd back and drink the second. Clever is a family tradition. Skin and hair whisper a longer argument. The air on these shores can be vicious with insects, harsh with sun, tender with evening cool. Less body hair makes parasites easier to spot, and mud easier to clean. More melanin turns sun scolding into sun tolerable. Historians still argue whether waterside habits had anything to do with later shifts in hair and fat, or whether those traits rode in on running open country life and a dozen other pressures. Fringe fans love to say aquatic like a spell. Most of your future scholars will remind them that mosaics of woods, grass, and water make better stories than single rivers turning apes into merfolk. You nod and keep your mud on. Even sleep gets hardware tweaks. Calluses bloom where roots are bed frames. Hip flexors learn the half curl that lets you launch from almost rest. You place your spine so a single shoulder roll becomes a pivot. Your stick already an arm's length extension of no thank you. The smallest curl into commas where your breath can feel them, biology's version of a burglar alarm with excellent snuggle features. Light Joke 3 premium package includes warm toes and the occasional dung beetle astronomy show. You practice gratitude disguised as routine. You oil your feet with crushed seeds so the skin stays tough without cracking, because cracked skin is an invitation parasites RSVP to. You retie gourd cords, file shell edges against stone, and rub ash on your wrists to erase shine. You do these things not because they're interesting, but because repetition is armor. The shoreline smiles on boring heroes. And while you're at it, you keep the stories shaped like tools. Make the water pay daylight. Never sit at a slide. Drink the second gourd. Gravel sings. Velvet lies. Periscope, then crouch. Each rule knots to a muscle, a tendon, a habit. Bodies built for edges aren't just bones and arches. They're rehearsals with jokes braided through stick angles that become reflexes and mud stripes that feel like uniform more than costume. Tomorrow you'll stand again with toes spread on honest ground ankles, mat stick ahead. The lake will write in teeth and shine. You'll answer in tendon and memory. Fear arrives as a jolt. You turn it into choreography. That's the quiet craft tonight, catching the lightning in your ribs and bottling it as a rule someone smaller can carry. You begin with a story because stories travel faster than legs. By fig drum glow, you draw the lake with one finger on dust, then add the polished groove of a crocodile slide, then two small dots for eyes that are not stars. You hum the part where thirst wins, and the little ones groan because they know the next beat. Then you change the ending, your favorite magic trick. Make the water pay daylight, you chant, and together you erase the dots with your thumb. Morning turns stories into drills. You lead the youngest to a safe shallow pocket and play echo steps. Your heel lands, their heel lands in your print, your stick taps, their stick taps, your body leans, theirs leans. And when you call slide mark, everyone does the shuffle backward in diagonals laughing, because retreat feels like a dance. When you practice it where teeth can't buy tickets. You practice periscope steps through sedge, high, as their shoulders letting them rise for 3 strides, then drop low, then rise again, so curiosity learns a leash. Light joke 1, congratulations. You're running a very exclusive dance school with terrible uniforms and excellent survival rates. You keep the rule book short and memorable. Gravel sings. Velvet lies. Drink the second gourd. Keep cuts out of water. 2 exits always. No splashing at slides. The sayings are hooks. The drills are the rope. A small hand repeats them as if they were spells, which, in a way, they are words that bend bodies into wiser shapes. When someone forgets and gets ankle deep in porridge, you sing the twist and lift song you taught back in section 9, and the rhythm unglues mud better than panic ever could. The fig drum does more than keep time. It turns fear into rehearsal. You thump out the cadence of last night's hyena patrol, so the group learns the difference between far laughter and near business, between conversation and intention. You click tongue for left, right, behind, moving hands like shadows to match the clicks and the smallest beam, because hand language is a secret club that lets them talk without drawing the knight's attention. Mainstream fact to underpin your little school living primates copy each other's tricks. Chimps learn leaf sponging for water by watching. Capuchins adopt regional nut-cracking styles. Even meerkats tone down scorpion stingers and hand prey to pup-ups, a rare case of deliberate teaching. You don't know their names. You know their logic. Make the lesson smaller, then make it theirs. You braid memory into places. At a dangerous bank, you scratch a crosshatch into a fig's bark at shoulder height, 1 notch for a croc nest found. 2 for recent polish. 3 if someone made the river pay daylight and still felt watched. Notches weather slowly, which is perfect. Rules should endure like bark does. When floods come, you show the little ones the muddy necklaces on trunks and make a game of pointing 1 body length above the highest mark. Camp goes here or higher. The termite citadel becomes a classroom. You tap it and let them feel the deep drum resonate through bone proof that high ground has a voice. Fear also travels in costumes. You smear clay number 5 along wrists and ankles, then stripe the little ones with playful seriousness, 2 bands, then a dot, then a handprint, so they learn that matte skin is not fashion, it's a verb. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Still not runway ready. They giggle and you nod because laughter locks rules in better than scolding. You even let them paint you a trust exchange that says the rules are for everyone. When the stripes dry, you hold up a wet fish scale and show them how shine vanishes on mud but winks on bare skin. The lesson fits in a glint. Mimicry turns nerves into muscle memory. You stage a fake cat at dusk. 1 adult belly crawls through reed's tail made of vine whiskers, a bundle of grass. And the sentinel practices the 2-breath signal. The group compresses by a thumb width, and no one panics because the teeth are leaves. Later, you switch roles. A youngster gets to wear the vine tail and discover how power feels from the other side. They learn mercy too, how close is too close. When stillness beats bravado, why a clean exit is the best applause. Light joke 2 tonight's theatre review. 5 stars would play Pray Again. You keep a little superstition in the toolkit because it helps bodies obey. No singing at the water's lip. No reaching into holes unless your stick says hello first. Never whistle to call someone who's late. Whistles in reeds mean snake in some worlds, and you have no reason to argue with a world you can't see. Are these rules true in the hard sense? Maybe sometimes, not always. But they aim bodies toward what works. Quiet patience and the humility to let unseen things be unseen. The elder's scars become chapters. A healed crescent on a calf hippo brush by in a channel they once treated like a sidewalk. A faint ladder of marks on an ankle catfish spines because someone stepped where velvet lied. You ask for the stories again because repetition makes them less about pain and more about map-making. Make the water pay daylight, the aunt repeats, and taps your shoulder twice, so the sentence sets where your deltoid will remember when your brain forgets. Fear without a map is noise. Fear with a map is mentorship. Historians still argue whether what you're doing, codifying drills, enforcing taboos, adding notches to bark. Staging pretend ambushes counts as proto-culture, or just good instincts dressed up in rhythm, and whether early hominins deliberately taught or simply performed until the young absorbed. You don't settle it. You watch a 4-year-old sign slide mark before you speak the word and decide the debate can wait at least one lifetime. You also borrow tools from neighbors without asking permission. Baboons on a far bank assign sentinels with a better view. You copy the rotation so no one's ears fray into useless ringing. Warthogs demonstrate the art of backing into a burrow so tusks face the world. You teach a parallel trick sleep with feet toward escape, head toward problem. Jacanas ferry chicks under wings on lily pads. You invent your own taxi, a sling of bark fiber that lets a small one ride high, while you wade shallow and boring. Fringe tidbit clutched because it delights you. Wrap your knuckles on a big, dry termite mound, and the sound carries far. You use it as a gossip drum when the group is strung out 3 taps for water safe, 2 for cat walked, 1 long roll for flood. Thought about it? Is it a perfect system? No. But it sounds like competence. When mistakes happen, and they do, you ritualize the postscript. A gourd lost to a curious suck becomes a find the cord session the next morning. Everyone tying, untying, and retying until fingers can do it while eyes watch water. A scrape on a shin becomes a lesson in ash and patience, not nails and infection. A near miss with a croc turns into the longest, softest story you know told 3 nights in a row, so the fear gets bored and leaves behind only the parts you want. Distance diagonals, daylight. You cultivate ceremony around the things that keep returning. Every first rain you walk the small ones to a rock pan and let them drink sky-borrowed water so their tongues know the taste of safety. Every first flood you stand at the high water necklace and raise their hands to where camp begins. Every first fig of the season you sit in shade and practice silence together. A rehearsal for the patient listening that makes night school in Section 10 pass without incident. Light joke 3 tuition at night school remains payable in figs and good behavior. Mainstream fact to tuck under the fig leaves. Many human groups across rivers and centuries mark high floods on walls and trees and wrap danger in songs. Don't swim at dusk. Don't fetch alone because melody sticks where lectures slide off. You don't have walls or writing. You have bark beats and a taste for little jokes that help big rules go down easy. If someone snorts at clay number 5 or apex ears weakly, good humor is glue, and glue holds when ankles want to run. When dusk folds, you test the day's memory quietly. You point at a sand tongue and raise 2 fingers. A child whispers velvet lies. You pause at a reed runnel and tilt your head. A teenager smears their wrist mat and grins. You angle across an honest riffle, and no one splashes. The lake smiles with too many teeth, and your group smiles back with too many rules. Fear arrived like lightning. You've bottled it in habits, painted it in mud, sung it into drills, and hidden it in jokes that make the lesson sit close without biting. You fall asleep with a small hand on your ribs, counting your breaths the way you counted thunder in Section 8, feeling how rhythm turns panic into plan. Tomorrow the water will try a new trick because water is an artist. Tomorrow night your story will grow one beat longer, one notch deeper, one joke sharper. Memory isn't a museum here. It's a living reed bed, always hushing, always teaching, always ready to cut a silhouette of danger and hand it to someone who needs it before they know they do. By late dry season, the world shrinks to a brown eye that doesn't blink. The lake has retreated to a last stubborn bowl, edges trampled into lace water, thick as tea, left too long a smell of old fish and hot pennies. Every path you've mapped for months converges here like threads snagged on the same thorn. Hippo highways pour into the rim. Crocodile slides polish one quadrant to glass. Reed corridors carry the soft S of snakes. Cats and hyenas orbit in separate confident ellipses. Even the wind seems to cue. You stand upwind on a rib of cracked clay and let your eyes sketch the crowd before your ankles volunteer. This is where time gets louder. You choose the hour that makes risky neighbors lazier, full daylight when heat leans on backs and ambushers prefer the shade. You chalk your wrists and ankles back to matte with clay-numbed 5, the house brand. Crocodile dung sunscreen remains absolutely not the look, and you trace 3 exits with a stick. A gravel tongue near a dead log, a fig root ladder 2 strides upslope, and a termite mound that has rescued you before. The group gathers into commas, with space to breathe and space to launch. Your sentinel's breath says okay so far. Your ears tune for the cough of water that means not okay at all. You read the lip as if it were a ledger. Fresh polish glints on one ramp, crusted bubbles cling to a second, both expensive. A third, shaded by a fallen trunk, shows old claw marks, no wet shine, and a shallow shelf that forces any big body to show its back before it shows its bite. That's the one. You send 2 shepherds to test sticks ahead, feet sliding. They tap weight, listen for the bead string of gas in mush a lie, and love the honest chatter of gravel. You consider the thirsty little ones and the even thirstier hours ahead, and count heartbeats, not minutes. The water itself speaks a dry season accent. Small fish gulp at the surface gills, working overtime in soup that forgot how to breathe. Mainstream fact felt as much as known when pools stagnate and heat rises, oxygen drops. Fish crowd the skin to sip air, and everything with a mouth remembers it has preferences. Dead catkins clog a corner where the wind herds them. A heron stands there anyway, patient as arithmetic. In open shallows, dragonflies keep patrols short and tight, saving fuel. A marabou stork waits near the carcass of yesterday's ill-timed antelope. If this were a later age, you'd swear it cools itself by fouling its pale legs, a surprisingly effective if eccentric trick among its kind. You file the image and decline to adopt the method. Light joke 1, your summer skincare line will continue to feature mud and shade, not that. Thirst debates with math. The safe choice is migration. Follow elephant spoor northwest toward a rumor of pans under rock and the kind of clean sky borrowed water you trust. The risky choice is endurance sip here at the lip, where everybody, including Teeth Unlimited, renews their membership at least twice a day. Your nose reads dust over the horizon. Elephants have passed within a day, maybe 2. Elephants know where the map holds secrets. Mainstream fact for your bones, those great bodies will sometimes dig with tusks and feet in dry riverbeds, bringing up filtered water that smaller mouths can share. You'd like to share. You also don't want anyone to collapse before you get there. You decide to take the smallest insurance policy available, 2 measured gourd fills at the safest shelf. Then you leave. You make the water pay daylight, then you make your feet pay distance. Rolls fall into place like beads on a cord. Upstream sentinel fixes on the mirror. Downstream catcher takes a post 2 strides from the exit. One shepherd slides in heel first, stick like a ruler. A second follows shoulders. Set body angled, so a sudden lunge buys space rather than panic. Your own stance is that tall, cautious half-rise periscope. Steps just long enough to read any floating logs that forgot how to be logs. Crocodile arithmetic interrupts. A low gloop fists the surface near a reed seam, and the light breaks wrong along a curving line that moves without rippling back just below the skin. You squeeze a palm, the quiet hold. Everyone freezes into curated stillness. The back drifts, changes its mind, and slides toward the hippo-churned quadrant. You let 5 heartbeats pass, so your nerves can find their chairs again. Light joke 2, stored for later retelling hydration, remains a team sport. The opposing team just brought its star player to the field. A different diplomacy unfolds at the rim. An old Anthracothera cousin hovers in thigh-deep water eyes, high ears, higher, blowing disgruntled bubble chains that spell occupied even for illiterates. You do not get between bulk and door. You edge in where the shelf begins, kneel with one knee, so you can pivot and let the seep-through sand fill the gourd, first pour back, second pour yours. The young one on your hip reaches for the mirror. You keep their hand busy on your collarbone, so curiosity doesn't write you into someone else's story. A hyena downwind laughs once, not at you specifically. You accept the ambience and decline the invitation. Drink done you back out diagonally and erase your prints with your palm, because vanity is free and patterns are not. The group rotates past the fig ladder to the gravel path that points toward elephant dust. Ankles vote for migration. Bellies agree. You let your gaze sweep one last time over the bowl so you can wrap a rule around it here, all appetites assemble, teeth thirst, and the invisible paperwork of parasites. You can win some mornings. You cannot win the season. Historians still argue whether these crucibles, the last waterholes in cruel months, pushed your kin toward wider seasonal circuits or locked them into tighter refuges, whether memory palaces grew to hold long, thirsty roots, or stories grew to hold stubborn, defended pools. You don't sign on to a side. You shoulder a small one. Smear another stripe on your wrist and follow the country's tusk marks, because sometimes the smartest thing is to let someone else be the geologist. Dust tastes like coin on your tongue as you walk. You pass a place where elephants have churned the bed of an old stream into a pale pitted quilt. At one pit's bottom, water gleams clearer than the bowl, a small mirror in the cracked earth. You let the group sip leaf by leaf, the smallest first, while you stand tall enough to supervise the horizon. Then you move again, not fast, not slow, all knees and patience and jokes in low supply, until the fig shade finally arranges itself over your heads like permission. When you stop, evening is folding. You inventory calves, mud-tired gourds half full, and morale stubborn. You mark a sleep shelf above a debris necklace by tapping the trunk, and the trunk answers in that deep termite mound bass that means good choice. You smile into the fan of wind as it starts soft and regular and promising to comb the gnats out of the dark. Light Joke 3, your subscription to Apex Ears Weekly, renews automatically at dusk. Cancellation requires proof of rain. You settle into the posture that pretends to be still and isn't. The little one's hand rides your ribs. The last glint of the far bowl winks behind you, then is gone behind scrub. Tomorrow you will wake and follow dust toward pans, and if luck wants to flirt, toward pools in rock that belong to the sky more than to the river. Tonight you rest with mud on your wrists, exit lines in your head, and a decision that feels like a long exhale, not endurance, not stubbornness, movement. The ground you choose now is quiet ground high enough that thunder would have to write a long letter before it found you soft enough that your shoulder finds a hollow and decides to keep it. The air lifts a clean ribbon off the ridge and sets it across your face, cool and even, the sort of breeze that forgets to carry news. Leaves talk in the smallest syllables. Far-off crickets measure the distance between moments, and then forget to finish the math. You let them. Around your ankles, the last lace of dried mud loosens, flaking into comfortable maps that don't need reading anymore. The small weight against your ribs grows heavier, then lighter, then still, and your own breath follows a slow slope downward into the easy part of night. Somewhere behind the hill, the crowded bowl keeps breathing without you turning under stars that have their own patient business. You are allowed to leave some problems working overnight. If you listen very softly, the body answers. Calves settle, shoulders set down the stick they were carrying. Even when your hand already let go, jaw unclenches the exact width of a fig seed. The rules that kept you busy all day don't need to speak now. They can drowse in a tidy stack. Make the water pay daylight gravel, sings drink the second gourd, each one folding into the next, until they are just the texture of being careful, which itself becomes the texture of being calm. Let the fan hum of the wind be the room you sleep in. Let the dark be a blanket that remembers your shape. If a thought taps your shoulder, it's only to say that tomorrow knows the path. You taught it the steps. It will take you there when the light is ready. For now, eyes close, jaw soft, breath long. And the shore that loved you and argued with you all day becomes a quiet line far away, less a place than a friendly memory that waits unhurried beyond sleep.